Senator Conrad, you're first up in the queue. You're welcome to open.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Good evening, colleagues. Good evening, Nebraska. I just wanted to rise in support of LB 1300, introduced by my friend Senator Bostar, which contains a host of important issues emanating from the government committee. I believe that this was also prioritized by my friend Senator Ballard, and appreciate his designation thereof so that we could move these important measures forward. The government committee worked very hard to pull these pieces together, and it's primarily related to issues to help with measures to keep our communities and our state and our country strong under the auspices and umbrella of national security issues. It helps veterans. It establishes a Asian Affairs Commission, which our friend Senator Sanders has worked diligently on for years, and then a host of other important issues. But really, I think at the heart of this issue is our shared commitment to ensuring security for our citizens. And that was top of mind for all of us on the government committee as we were looking at the measures that the governor brought forward, that individual members brought forward, and that we wanted to make sure were passed this year. So I did just want to note that in addition to how important the underlying bill is, I wanted to also recognize the extraordinary juxtaposition of attempts to utilize this measure related to security and our veterans for a divisive, national, partisan battle. That's not who we are in the Nebraska Legislature. We shouldn't respond to tweets as they come out. We have rules, we have a process, we figure out how to come together. And on issues like this, particularly issues like this, we should not be putting our citizens' security at risk for political tricks. That's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. I understand that senators have limited amount of vehicles available to them at this late stage in the debate to move measures forward. But the measure that has been attached, which is causing a great deal of concern, has never been execed on in the government committee. We weren't asked to exec on it in the government committee, is my understanding. It has not been prioritized. It has not been advanced. It has not moved through our process accordingly because it was not a priority issue this year until some tweets popped up. And that's not serious governance. That's not how we should operate in the Nebraska Legislature. And I would remind my friend, Governor Pillen, as I saw him use the power and prestige of his office to issue a media statement in response to said tweets. I'd also like him to think and look very carefully at the wording in that press release, which called upon Republicans in the Nebraska Legislature to take this issue up. And if there's a national spotlight on Nebraska over this issue right now, let me use this as a moment to educate our fellow Americans. We are unique in this unicameral legislature. We run and we serve without party labels. We are nonpartisan and independent. We are one house. That is a gift that our citizens gave to us decades ago that we have fiercely protected. And when people forget, whether they be former presidents, present governors, or members of this body, it is our duty to remind each of us and the broader public of the oath that we took to serve in a nonpartisan institution. So that being said, I'd like the body to quickly realize that the divisive measures which have been attached are not germane. I think that senators recognize that we need to remove them so that we can move forward with LB 1300, which advances important security issues for Nebraska. Now is not the time to play partisan games with serious security issues contained in LB 1300. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized, and this is your third opportunity.
What's up, Rich? I still have a close, correct? Yes, okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, colleagues. I don't know about you all, but I am having little like flashbacks, PTSD, coming back from the short dinner break and wanting to just talk about salad, which I did have a Greek salad for dinner from Salt and Sky. It was delicious. So, okay. LB 1300 is Senator Bostar's bill that it was adopt the Pacific Conflict Stress Test Act and the Foreign Adversary Contracting Prohibition Act. Okay. I'm sorry, I was so distracted with other things happening that I'm not sure if I support 1300 or not. I probably do, but I'm going to have to take a look at it in between times on the mic. So I have an IPP motion and I have additional motions after that. This is a debate on my side. And by my side, I mean me, not my side of the aisle or anything like that. For me, this is a debate about winner take all or how we split our electoral votes. But I know that this is also an important bill, LB 1300, and people are probably going to want to talk about it. And we don't have the committee amendment up yet. But if you are interested in sharing your thoughts on the actual bill, please feel free. We will be here irregardless. So substantive debate on 1300 is probably warranted in addition to substantive debate on winner take all, because neither of those things is on the board. So you can choose which lane you want to be in and which thing you want to talk about. So I'm going to reiterate some points again. Splitting of our electoral votes is an economic driver for the entire state, because it's not just about what comes to Omaha or Lincoln. It's about what comes to arenas in Omaha and Lincoln. There's a turnback tax, and it goes into a cash fund, and that cash fund funds smaller communities' economic development projects for cultural enrichment. So it is important. And when presidential candidates come to Omaha, arenas sell out. It does not matter who it is. It is a sold out show. So we don't want to lose that. That's huge for Omaha and for the state. Additionally, it waters down the voice of the people. The consolidation of electoral votes in other states has caused it to be mostly a math game in federal electoral politics. And you can watch all the pundits talking about the math. Well, they just need this state and this state and this state. And then other states in the union are completely disregarded, completely ignored by one party or the other. In Nebraska, that's not the case. We aren't taken for granted. We aren't ignored. It helps boost our economy. It helps with voter turnout. For other things.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. So that's what this is about for me. I had started reading from former Senator Al Davis's testimony at the last hearing, and I think I was like at about 1 minute at the time. And interestingly, Senator Lowe had asked him at the hearing if he voted for winner take all, and he said, I did. And he said, now you're opposed. Al Davis says, yes, I am. I thought it through. In fact, somebody made reference to that. I was going to mention it. The filibuster that he referenced was my last year in the legislature, and the thing failed because there was a dispute about some exchanging votes over marijuana piece. That's interesting. So that's what happened to that one. But I think the more I think about it, the more I think we are better served.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator John Kavanaugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, first off, colleagues, I have this handy dandy counter some of you have been asking about that counts the number of times I talk. So I don't have to rely on the chair to tell me when it's my third time. If I do my job, I'll know it's my third time. So it's just some personal accountability that I'm engaging in to better serve all of you. So I don't know where I'm at on this bill yet. I talked to Senator Bostar about it. I do like some of the stuff that's in the committee amendment. I have some questions about, the underlying bill, but I did want to talk. I was going to talk about some specifics of the bill, but I had a subject matter I wanted to talk about on the last bill, and I think I've figured out how to tie it to 1300. So I had up on my computer here something I didn't get to talk about, which was the map of the interconnections of our grid in the United States. And so the United States, the continental United States, is divided into 3 sections. We have the Eastern Interconnect, which is essentially everything east of the Rockies, north of Texas, is called the Eastern Interconnect. Then you have the Western Interconnect, which is west of the Rockies, excluding Texas. And then you have Texas, which is the Texas Interconnect. So those are basically 3 self-contained grids. And we've been talking about electric generation. And basically, you put electricity on the grid in Nebraska, it's on the same grid as New York, Connecticut, Maine. Granted, a lot of that electricity doesn't get there, really doesn't, none of it gets there, because it's the path of least resistance. It's going to go to the first light bulb that it comes across. But they're interconnected. And the reason this is relevant to this bill, which is Senator Bostar's, I think it was Pacific Threat Assessment, something along those lines. It's something like that. Somebody can correct me. But anyway, because his bill is about foreign adversaries and foreign threats, and one of the concerns are soft targets. So things that can be damaged more easily than, say, a hardened target like a courthouse, although this Capitol building doesn't probably qualify as a hardened target, but a courthouse, federal building, a military base, things that have some sort of, those bollards, barricade things you can't drive close to, and things like that, and a lot of other hardening aspects of it. They're hard to attack. So, but there are things like power lines out in the middle of nowhere that somebody could blow up one of the pylons and take out a power line. And the reason that is relevant and interesting is because you knock out, say, one key power line, and then that forces all the electricity generated on one side of it to go around. And then that can overload those power lines, and then you have a domino effect where you knock out other power lines. And so I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about the 2003 Eastern United States blackout. This was right before I went to college, if I'm dating myself. Well, maybe I was in college. I don't know. However old I am. Anyway, but a power outage started, I want to say it was in Ohio, and then it kind of went around Lake Erie on a domino effect, knocking out overloading circuits and forcing power generation offline to protect itself until you got the state of New York and all of New England was knocked out, and then Ontario and Canada got knocked out, curved around and back up. And that was a result of essentially one pretty key transmission line being overloaded and then forcing it to all of that generation to another power line, which caused that to overload and then dominoed all the way across to the eastern seaboard and mid-Atlantic. And that was sort of an organic mistake. I don't remember what the specific reason was. I think something went offline.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President, and then caused, everything to go haywire, as it were. But you could manufacture that. And that's one of the things we're concerned about, I think. Senator Bosar can correct me if I'm wrong, or Senator Ballard, this is a priority bill, could correct me, but those are the types of things we're trying to prevent somebody from intentionally creating a cascading failure that could take out the entire Eastern Interconnect, which goes, again, from the Rockies to the East Coast, down to Florida, excluding Texas, up to New England, and then really does include Canada as well. So there's a real potential for that risk. And so that's why I say I'm thinking through on this bill, and as I'm talking about it, I appreciate it a little bit more as I talk on it, which again is why we talk on these bills and we think through these issues. Some of us do it out loud. So I'll go and look up the history of the 2003 blackout for you all, because I'm sure you're all really interested in this issue.
Time.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Hunt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, colleagues. We are debating a bill, LB 1300, that I think is a great bill. This is a bill that went through our process in the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. During the course of the hearing, Senator Bostar, who introduced the bill, answered questions about the nature of the bill. We had some good back and forth about what it does and what it aims to do and who supports it and who's against it. In the executive session, subsequent executive sessions in the government committee, we found this bill to be a vehicle for some other really great pieces of policy that I and certainly Chairman Brewer and people who have bills that have been amended into this bill by the committee would like to see get a day in the sun. And I think that there's a way to make that happen if we can take off the amendment that adds LB 764 introduced by Senator Lippincott out of the queue of amendments for this bill. My concern, it would make sense to a lot of you. It wouldn't be very confusing to hear that there are a lot of different vote cards going around on this motion, on this measure to introduce a winner-take-all system in Nebraska. I've heard of vote cards that have 32. I've heard of vote cards that have 16. I've looked at them both, and it makes me a little bit too nervous to even have this come up for a vote. We can certainly talk about germaneness of a bill like LB 764 on LB 1300. I don't think it passes the germaneness test. Senator Slama, who introduced the amendment, said on Twitter that she doesn't think it passes the germaneness test. The function of this amendment, what it would actually end up doing, is just be a litmus test, a purity test for you registered Republicans in the body for the election of Donald Trump. That's all that's happening in Nebraska. And now Nebraska is trending on Twitter. Everybody's watching what's happening in this state right now because of these motions that have been filed on this bill and are likely to continue to be filed on subsequent bills. We've also heard all the gossip and rumors about other bills that are going to have 764 amended on it. And when you think about all of the other important measures that we have before us this session, with so few days left, tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday, these are the last 2 days we have to get into any general file debate. And by doing things like filing motions of very, very, very controversial measures like LB 764 that the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee has chosen to keep in committee, has chosen not to exec on yet. We have not introduced an amendment to this. We have not had a vote on this. It's not ready for the floor. But with very, very precious few days left here in the body, with so many other prioritized bills yet to be heard on general file for even the first round of our 3 rounds of debate, this is what's going to take up a lot of the oxygen. And colleagues are walking around saying, it would be really great if we could just move past this and get to a vote on the amendment. We can put it to bed. It's not that simple. I get it. Yes, it would be great to get to a vote and to move past it. But then what you have is then you get into your purity test. Then we've got a vote. We've got a record up on the board that Donald Trump, his little friends, Charlie Kirk, whatever right-wing incel podcaster is watching what's happening in the legislature. And then what they start to do is what they've already done to Senator Aguilar. They put your name on the internet. They've already done this to many of you because I've heard that you guys are getting phone calls to your offices, and I'll talk about that on my next time on the mic. They put your name on the internet. They put your phone on the internet, not necessarily your office phone, friends, your cell phone, your home address, your wife's name. How's she going to like that? This is how they move and this is how they work. And by having a record vote on this, you are going to be a target for them. Whether you vote yes or no, you're opening yourself up to a target for this machine that we see will stop at nothing to elect Donald Trump. And that's exactly what's going on. They think they can't do it without the one vote in Omaha. I say he should come here and earn it. Come take the electoral vote from Omaha. If you earn it, you can have it, Donald Trump. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Blood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow senators, friends all, the few that are left in the chambers. I might be in support of this IPP motion. I'm not talking about the upcoming amendment because it's not on the board. I still want to keep talking about this bill, LB 1300, because I still have concerns. And one of the concerns that I have is this weird trend that has started with the new governor where so many of the people that come and testify on bills are actually vendors. They're not professors from the university, from Creighton, from Offutt Air Force Base, specialists that can give us unbiased information and data about things like security. Instead, it's American Global Strategies advisory firm out of Maryland. It's China tech threat. I'm glad to see that somebody that is in reference to technology and how it can threaten Nebraska was on the testifier list. But I think it's weird because this is not the only bill that this has happened. This is one of, I think, 4 bills this year. And I'm including one over the interim. So I don't know what that means. I find that very suspect, not just as a senator, but as a citizen, where we are trying to tip the scales in the hearings and only put out the information that we think you need to know, not what you truly need to know, by bringing in the experts. And you can say, well, these people do this for a living. They are experts. But I believe they come with a certain bias. While if we get that, the data, the science, the facts from professors and scientists and people who give us unbiased information, I think there's a difference. And we know that cyber actors in China have used malware to hold at-risk critical U.S. infrastructures, such as systems that provide water, electricity, and fuel to U.S. citizens. And they do this to provide options for China in case we ever do have a crisis. So in some ways, even though we have a great U.S. cybersecurity force, we know that we are constantly on our toes, trying to protect the United States from these types of cyber actors, bad actors. At the federal level, we have the U.S. Cyber Command and the National Security Agency, and they contest these threats. And we know that China is what's known as a near-peer adversary. You know, during the last election, we were worried about how Russia was involved in interfering with our elections. And what we really didn't know, but thank goodness some people at the federal level knew, is that they were conducting espionage on our national security. So then I started looking at Nebraska, and I remember seeing a picture of Governor Ricketts, and I want to say it's 2016. It's either 2016 or 2017, and he went to China and he asked China to invest in Nebraska. Now that was before we made them the big scare, right? I kind of feel like we're in World War II. And I'm not saying that we should not be concerned, but what I'm saying is sometimes I'm wondering if we're approaching this correctly. We're talking about vendors and contracts, but literally just 8 years ago, we were in China asking them to invest in our state. So what are we truly trying to do here? Are we trying to justify bringing on these vendors and spending outrageous amounts of money to have them work in Nebraska because maybe they're friends with somebody in the executive branch? Or are we truly trying to make Nebraskans safe? And if we're truly trying to make Nebraskans safe, then where is our state's cybersecurity effort? Where is our state's IT committee in the legislature? I feel that we're constantly putting the cart before the horse, and we never have a really strong foundation when we go into these efforts. And I can list many near misses over the last decade, 20 years, where we had fails in technology because we didn't have enough people knowing what was going on and how it worked. And so with that, I would yield back anytime, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Dungan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, colleagues. I believe I generally rise opposed to the IPP motion, and I'm still listening to the conversation with regard to LB 1300, but it does sound like from what we've talked about so far that it, along with the potential forthcoming committee amendment, does contain a number of good bills. And so I want to make sure that I have a chance to still hear that conversation. I do understand that the IPP motion is up on the board because of the potential of another amendment coming up, which has been discussed now, I think, a little bit, pertaining to winner take all. And I think it's already been explained, and I'm sure we're going to have more conversations about it. So I'm not going to dive too far into that right now, except to say that I do remain opposed to the idea of a winner take all system in Nebraska for a couple of reasons. One, I don't believe in diluting the vote of individuals, and I think that the current system that we have in Nebraska makes us special. When I travel to other conferences and when I talk to people about our state legislative system, they are constantly taken aback by all of the things that make us unique. One of those things, obviously, is the unicameral, which we are standing in right now. But when I talk to my colleagues or friends from other legislatures or other senates, and I explain to them that we only have one body, and in that body is 49 nonpartisan independent senators, they can't really fully understand or appreciate how that would work. But I think that what we've proven over the last many decades that we've been a unicameral is that it does work. And it works for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that it encourages us to work together. Certainly those who are followers of the legislature see that we disagree from time to time. And I think even today, if you've been watching for a while, you've seen some of those disagreements and you've seen the ebb and the flow of, emotions and frustrations. But at the end of the day, the intent of the way that our system is constructed here in Nebraska is to encourage us to work together and to not answer to any particular party. And I think that that second part is important because what it does is it encourages us as senators to vote how we believe and to vote how we feel, not just to vote how we are told. And when I talk to folks in other state senates or state legislatures, that is not the case. It couldn't be farther from the truth. I was talking to an individual who's a younger state senator, I think it was from Minnesota, and they were talking about the expectations from the party. And I was asking them, when you come to the floor, what is that like? Are you expected to vote a certain way? Are you expected to say a certain thing? And what they essentially said is that if you have disagreements with a piece of legislation or a bill, that you can express those obviously full-throated, but they expect it to be in committee. And by the time it makes it to the floor, it sounds like you are expected to, for lack of a better way to put it, get in line. And I respectfully take issue with that. You'll see any number of us on any day in this body disagree with each other. And you'll see us push back on each other, even if we're from the same political affiliation or political persuasion. We do argue and we push back on each other vehemently. And I can tell you that there's frank conversations that happen behind closed doors when these cameras are off where we disagree with each other all the time. But that's how it should be. And my fear is that we have seen a consolidation of power on the national level and an expectation that certain people get in line. And to me, that is not the Nebraskan way. I believe the Nebraskan way is to be independent, to do what you believe is right for your constituents, and to vote the way that you actually feel, not just the way you think you should vote. And when we talk about the implementation of a winner-take-all,
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President, we see now an outside influence and an outsized influence, power imposing upon Nebraskans and state senators in here who are independent, an expectation that you will vote a certain way. And if you don't vote a certain way, we see threats and we see fear being utilized to attain that goal. And I think that's wrong. So we'll have plenty of time to talk about the motions. We'll have plenty of time to talk about the underlying bill, but I just wanted to make sure I stated some of those things on the record and encourage my colleagues to continue to be independent and in doing so, continue to be Nebraskan. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Duncan. Senator Day, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good evening, colleagues. I rise in support of LB 1300 and in opposition to the IPP motion, but I would like to get up tonight and talk about
what we know is a potential amendment to this bill. And one of the reasons why we're spending so much time talking tonight is the change of the electoral college votes here for Nebraska to a winner-take-all system. Personally, I would echo the sentiments of Senator Michaela Cavanaugh in that if it was up to me, we would have a one-person, one-vote system of deciding who our president is. That is not what we have. We have the Electoral College that allots a certain number of Electoral College votes based on population to each state. The effort in establishing this was to ensure that overly populated urban areas would not outweigh the other areas of the country, and that every state would essentially have a say in deciding who the president of the country is. I think that is a noble goal. However, I feel as though over time we have seen some of the flaws in the Electoral College system, in that it essentially dilutes the votes of certain voters. And instead of moving towards a more accurate representation of who Americans want to be president, the effort to take Nebraska to a winner-take-all state is moving away, further away from that by further diluting the vote of Nebraskans. I hope that senators understand if you're voting for this measure, you are voting to dilute the vote of your own constituents. Particularly if you live in CD2. That's what you're doing. I also agree with Senator Hunt in that if you earn the votes, then you get them. Then you should have them. Electoral politics is not something in which you realize that you can't win with the current rules, so you go back to the drawing board and make a decision to change the rules so you can win. Because when you do that, you change the rules of democracy and you dilute the voice of your own voters. I don't understand it. Additionally, this is a bill that sat in committee all session that didn't even get an exec session, didn't get voted on. Nobody wanted to talk about it. And here we are with 6 days left in a very busy session talking about this bill because of tweets. We're scrambling at the last minute to try to get a piece of legislation passed based on politics, not based on policymaking. One of the things I've realized over my 4 years here is that there's a lot of people that get elected to this body to play politics. They don't care about policymaking. They don't care about democracy. They don't care about what's right for their constituents. They care, thank you, Mr. President. They care about winning at all costs, and they will do whatever they can to make that happen. By allocating electoral votes based on congressional districts, Nebraska ensures that each region within the state has a say in the outcome of the presidential election. This fosters a sense of inclusivity and representation that might otherwise be absent in a winner-takes-all system. It acknowledges the diversity of opinions and perspectives within our state, promoting a more nuanced and balanced approach to governance, which if you ever go talk to your constituents, you will hear from all of them. That's what they're looking for. They're not looking for fighting and tribalism. They're looking for moderation and balance in governance. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Day. Senator McKinney, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. In support of the IPP motion, definitely been a day, to say the least. Honestly, it's been thing after thing happening today, and this is another thing. And last night when I saw somebody's phone, but last night when I saw the tweet from the former president about this, I was like, oh, that's weird. And, you know, it's like, it makes you think that, you know, they want it for a reason, obviously, because there has to be some type of fear. Because if there wasn't some fear, there wouldn't be this, in my opinion, a last minute urgency or last minute Hail Mary to try to get this through, because we got what, I think 6-7 days left of the session. So now we're going to super politicize and polarize the session over this thing to take away the electoral vote, which has been in place for a while, almost my whole lifetime. I think my whole lifetime, if I'm counting right. And it's been a thing of pride for a lot of Nebraskans, especially those in Congressional District 2, to say, you know, we've had a part in, you know, the presidential elections. You know, that's something, that's what motivates people to get out to vote. And especially people from our community. It's hard, honestly, to get people to vote, because a lot of times people don't feel as though their votes matter, or their votes are going to change things, because for so long, things really don't change, and things haven't changed in a lot of ways. But, you know, when you cast a vote and then you see that, okay, I voted and we have a blue dot and we're able to influence the presidential election, that's something that people are prideful about. And to have this last minute attempt to try to take that away, that means, or that reads to me that there's some type of fear from the former president. And it's interesting, you know, he still wants to make America great again. And I would argue that when has America ever been great? Because America was founded on a lot of things that were not so great, you know, slavery, taking land away from Native Americans, and all type of other things. And we just have to be honest about that. And all the attempts across the country to ban books, to get rid of DEI for all these weird reasons, it's just, you know, I think maybe after President Obama was elected, I think the world, or no, not the world, this country was like, you know, we got to go back to pre-1960s, pre-Civil Rights Act. We got to go back to that, because America is not where it's supposed to be, because we elected a black president. So now we got to change all these laws, and we got to get back to that, because this is not the country our forefathers created. And, you know, our forefathers owned slaves.
1 minute.
And people don't like to tell the truth about that. And it's just really interesting that this last minute attempt to try to make these changes. And, you know, it must be some type of fear from somebody that they need these votes to try to secure this election. It probably will be close, honestly. So that's probably why they want to try to take it away. And while I'm here, I'm going to fight against that, because I don't think it's necessary. And I don't think the people in Nebraska think it's necessary. Looking at all these emails I've been receiving throughout the day and throughout the night, I think the people in Nebraska have spoken that they don't want to take away that option. And I think everybody in this body should listen to that. And thank you.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Senator Boastar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, colleagues, for your attention and participation in the conversation. So we are going to in a sense, act as if the committee amendment came up, and we're going to talk a bit about the bills that make up this package, because I think that there's a lot of very important stuff in here that should be discussed. And so with that, I would yield the remainder of my time to Senator Brewer.
Senator Brewer, you're yielded 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. All right, we will go into AM 3227. That is the government amendment to LB 1300. The amendment has a number of bills we'll run through. It makes the changes to the base bill. First changes that we made in 1300 is we're adding LB 2 from Senator Sanders, establishes a state-level Asian American Commission. Then LB 869er from Senator Bostar, that will allow our county veteran service officers to assist more of our veterans, especially those in the National Guard. And we got 887, which is my bill, will provide grants from NEMA to certain nonprofit organizations that need security measure updates. LB 1048, which is Senator Bostar bill, and that is to restore certain security protocols at chemical facilities in Nebraska. Then LB 1243, that is a Senator McDonald bill to establish a team office at the state fire marshals to help coordinate wildland response fires. And then lastly, LB 1358 from Senator McDonald, and it caps the salaries of some of our political subdivisions. Each of the senators at some point will try and get in the queue and speak on their specific bill, but the committee heard all of the bills and voted them out as a package. 1300 was heard on February 8th. We have made amendments to 1300 with some concerns that we had from public power. Those have been addressed, and that amendment we'll have later if we're allowed to add amendments to. But this committee bill represents a lot of work from the government committee. It is a lot of good bills that we were able to put together so that we were able to have this committee package put together. So I would ask for your support on LB 1300 and on AM 3227. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. Senator Frederickson, Senator Slama, you're recognized.
So I was going to call the question. Good evening, colleagues. I was, but I can't now. Sorry, Senator Frederickson. I seem to have given him a fright. But the queue has mysteriously filled up with Republicans to evidently prevent us from getting to the point where winner take all can be read across. It would seem as though people have gotten their marching orders. And I am just going to take a minute to outline because I'm feeling honest today. This is the problem with the current Republican Party in that, and this is why I brought the amendment, because we can get fired up about issues. We can make tweets and make posts saying Nebraska should do winner take all and do call to actions to get people to give money so that you can sponsor our efforts to continue encouraging senators to pass a bill. And then when the rubber meets the road and somebody actually brings the concept that y'all are doing the call to actions on, we do stuff like this where it's slow walking and preventing the amendment from even being read across. Don't get me wrong, I respect it. It's a grift because I understand that the current party infrastructure thrives off of victimhood and never actually winning, because actually governing and actually following through on the ideas that you're pushing is really difficult, and governing is hard. So why on earth would we try to get a win on an issue when we could just spin people up and fundraise off of it? I've been bringing winner take all since 2021. I'm not new to this fight. I'm here for this fight. But here it would seem as if we have the Republican Party filibustering a motion at somebody's request. No, I'm actually genuinely excited to find out who has requested people get into the queue to continue talking about Senator Kavanaugh's IPP so that we don't get to winner take all. Because somebody clearly has a problem with us actually doing the things that we're tweeting about. It would appear that once again, Republicans can talk a big talk, but can't walk the walk when it comes to actually getting things done. So I am excited. I have not put any work into counting votes here. I would assume this would go 8 hours because Senator Kavanaugh could bring a reconsider to take this to 8 hours. But I'm here for it. No, it's going to be, don't get me wrong, dishonest filibusters are definitely more difficult than on issues like taxes where you have meaty things that you can always reference. So I am interested to see where this goes. I am interested to see if it can go 8 hours. I might hop back in and call the question just to mix things up, but it's really clear what's happening now, and I'm fascinated to watch it happen and call it out in real time. It puts a smile on my face, but just in case anybody's watching who's wondering why winner take all isn't getting read across, it's because the Republicans have gotten in the line and are now talking about a bill to prevent the actual amendment from getting read across. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Slama. Senator John Kavanaugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my second time. Personal accountability. Well, when I was last on the mic, I talked about the 2003 Northeast blackout as a potential reason for the Pacific Threat Assessment. I didn't quite memorize the name again. Sorry, Senator Ballard. But then I did talk to Senator Bostar, who actually introduced this bill, and I said, was I right when I used that as an analogy for the type of threat that we're talking about? And Senator Bostar said, yeah, you're right. And this bill solves every problem you can think of. He doesn't know how much of imagination I have. So, but anyway. So the Pacific Threat Assessment and the report and all that, that's talking about these sort of the risk of the soft targets and these, infrastructure things that could cause, that somebody could do a small damage to a remote location and cause a cascading or catastrophic failure that goes from, in our case, Nebraska, and cascades across the Eastern Interconnect all the way down to, Key West, I think is all the way is the far end, the tip of Florida, or somewhere on that part of Maine. What's the name? Is it Sag Harbor? I don't know. There's a national park up there. Anyway, so you could create this great cascading blackouts by conveniently or appropriately placing some sort of device, say an improvised explosive device or something like that, on transmission lines in the middle of nowhere. So that's what we're talking about, are looking at those risk assessments. Anyway, so I did promise that I would look and see what the cause of the blackout was. So this is from Wikipedia, so take it for what it's worth. But Wikipedia, I think, sometimes gets things right. Northeast blackout of 2003 was a widespread power outage throughout parts of the Northeast and Midwestern United States and most parts of the Canadian province of Ontario, August 14th, 2003, beginning at 4:10 p.m. I actually remember watching this on television. Most places restored power within 7 hours, some as early as 6 p.m. on August 14th, within 2 hours. While New York City subways resumed limited service around 8 p.m., full power was restored in New York City and parts of Toronto on August 16th. I think that's 2 days. That's a long time. At the time, it was the world's second most widespread blackout in history, after the 1999 South Brazil blackout. The outage, which was much more widespread than the Northeast blackout of 1965. Affected an estimated 55 million people, including 10 million people in the southern and central Ontario and 45 million people in 8 United States. The blackout's proximate cause was a software bug in the alarm system at a control room at the First Energy of Akron, Ohio-based company. I thought I'd started in Ohio. I did not remember what the start was. Software bug. So I would imagine Senator Bostar would tell you that part of the threat assessment, I was thinking of, maybe traditional weapons, bombs, things like that. But we're talking cyber warfare in 2003. Software bug in an alarm system caused a cascading blackout starting in Ohio that went to the East Coast up into Canada and knocked out the power for 55 million people, some of them for 2 days. That's what we're talking about. Those are the type of risk assessment things we need to be thinking about. That's what this bill is. So, as I said, I don't know where I stand on this bill. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking myself into it by talking about what the real risks we're facing by not knowing the real scope and the vulnerability of our critical infrastructure. So that's a little bit of the history of the 2003 blackout. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Hunt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, colleagues and Nebraskans. For me, I understand what Senator Slama is doing. I have to say, game recognized game. She knows her concept. She knows what she's about. She moves on purpose. And I've always respected that about her, despite obviously, political differences that we have had privately and very publicly. But I see what she's doing. I support LB 1300. I support the committee amendment, which I think we would like to get to, that has so many amazing, let me not overstate, but so many really great measures in it. There is one that I really, really deeply support, introduced by Senator Sanders, to create the Asians, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders AAPI commission in Nebraska. We have commissions for many underrepresented groups in Nebraska, and the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee saw fit to introduce a committee amendment to create a commission for AAPI Nebraskans. And I think it's overdue. It's something I would like to see happen. And any of you who have bills that make up this committee amendment, you should talk to Senator Slama and see if you can convince her to pull this amendment off. Because until then, I think that this is too consequential for the state of Nebraska. This is one of those code red things that even in the short remaining days of session, even with very few hours left for debate, it rises to the level of being worth the fight. Donald Trump thinks it's worth the fight. Here's what pathetic worm Donald Trump said on his social media platform that he had to sell because he's been in so much trouble with the law. He said, Governor Jim Pillen of Nebraska, a very smart and popular governor who has done some really great things, came out today with a very strong letter in support of returning Nebraska's electoral votes to a winner-take-all system. Most Nebraskans have wanted to go back to the system for a very long time because it's what 48 other states do. It's what the founders intended, and it's right for Nebraska. Thank you, Governor, for your bold leadership. Let's hope the Senate does the right thing. Nebraskans, respectfully ask your senators to support this great bill. Pathetic worm Donald Trump thinks that he knows what's best for Nebraska and what Nebraskans want, but he says he hopes the Senate does the right thing. Colleagues, Nebraskans, what's the first thing about Nebraska? We have a unicameral legislature. Anyway, could get all into that, but this man is building up the governor, obviously wants this electoral vote because he's so scared he can't win the presidency without it. He's so scared that the same thing will happen that happened in the last presidential election. He'll lose, if he's not in prison at that time or whatever. And I can see why it would make someone like him very nervous because he's also out of money as well. So he's in a very difficult position himself. It could also be the case, of course, that Governor Pillen is trying to line himself up for a cabinet position or something like that. Many illustrious former Republicans in the Nebraska legislature and in our state government have gone on to become members of our congressional delegation, have done service for the cabinets of various Republican presidents, and we know how politics works, and this is probably part and parcel to that. But I'm telling you guys, you don't understand what it's like to be under the magnifying glass of somebody like Donald Trump, somebody like one of these incel podcasters like Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro, like all of these men who get on the horn, who get on, thank you, Mr. President, who get on their podcasts and they say things like, this is something that Charlie Kirk said, who's been tweeting to all of you like Senator Aguilar. He said that when he gets on a plane and he sees a black pilot, he gets very nervous and wants to get off the plane because he knows that that's a diversity, equity, and inclusion hire. So this is the man that made a tweet that you're taking orders from. It could never be me. Imagine doing anything because a podcaster told you to. To use his vernacular, that's beta behavior. And that's not what we stand for in Nebraska, no matter what beta Donald Trump says or Charlie Kirk or anyone else. We can debate winner take all on its merits when it's ready for the floor, and that's not the point that we're at today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Riepe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to say that I embrace the winner take all, and my Health and Human Services Committee partner, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, invited all of those with thoughts on the winner-take-all legislation to join. So I have into this legislative chat. So thank you, Senator Cavanaugh. I'm bringing insight to which only a fool would really disagree. The ideal electoral college votes should be based on the votes of each congressional district. Great idea, but not good enough for other states to adopt. No one beyond Nebraska and Maine. So it works against Nebraska and Little Maine. Fairness and full representation has been noted as an issue. How about if California, with its 55 electoral college votes, was by a congressional district? If yes, California would be a different and a better state, and we would be a better and different country with fairness and full representation. California is one example of 48 other states in which winner-take-all laws exist. Representative government equals representative engagement, which would be very different if every state awarded electoral college votes by congressional districts, but they don't. The argument is made that Omaha would lose revenue from the national media. I would remind some of my fellow senators and viewers that Iowa is just east across the Missouri River, and Omaha blasts political information all over western Iowa and eastern Nebraska, so that we would not lose all of that revenue. I'm not sure that we would lose any of it because Iowa becomes an important state as well. There is no TV media in Council Bluffs, so money is spent in Omaha to reach Iowa, and especially on a presidential election year. Please remember, all national Nebraska senators, a vote for winner take all can be the one that might be the one critical vote to keep Sleepy Joe from the White House. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Riepe. Senator Jacobson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I must not be on the right list because I haven't gotten the email regarding how I'm supposed to vote. So I'm in some pretty difficult territory right now. But for the record, I'm not here to filibuster. I'm kind of riding with the wave of, if we're going 8 hours, I guess I'll ride along and really speak to a bill that I have a personal interest in. And I'm going to be very brief and sit back down, so I'm not going to take the 5 minutes. But Senator Bostar and I both worked on a bill. I had the bill drafted. He had the same bill drafted. And so rather than both of us dropping the same bill, he did, and that would be 869. I co-sponsored the bill with him. This is a bill dealing with county veteran service committees. I had County Commissioner Michaela Wooler from Lincoln County, along with our County Veteran Service Officer, Tom Gann, work with me on that particular bill. What it would do is currently your veteran service organization or your veteran service officers, they're set up to where the county can assess a 1 cent levy. Those dollars can be used for the VSO, veteran service officer, to help veterans who have been honorably discharged to take care of hardships that they may have, whether that be housing, food, shelter, funeral expenses, medical expenses. But the problem is the way it's drafted today, you must have served at a time during active combat overseas. So today we have a number of those veterans who are in that donut hole, if you will, where they didn't serve during that time, but they need help. This also opens it up to National Guard units. So this is vitally needed. We were looking for a place to move the bill, didn't have a priority. We're able to slide it into LB 1300, and along with the other bills that are being brought by the committee, figured it was a safe path forward. So I'm interested in passing that bill. And I'm willing to do whatever we have to do to get that bill passed. So I'm not wild about having a bill brought on that could be a poison pill to not allow it move forward. So I'm interested in moving it forward. I'm certainly fine with the winner take all. I would be supportive of that, but if it's going to kill the bill, then I'm going to jettison that and I'm going to support LB 1300 on a clean with the bills that are non-objectionable. It's late in the session. We need to get some things done. I really want this bill passed. I think it's critically important to get 869 across the finish line, along with the other bills that are important. We're running out of time to restart. I would hope that the body will not take votes here that will stop LB 1300 from going across the finish line. With that, thank you, Mr. President, for the time.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Dugan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, good evening yet again. Rise probably still opposed to the IPP in general, but unfortunately we find ourselves here with the IPP by virtue of what is down the line filed on here as an amendment. And in my first time on the mic, I talked a little bit about my general opposition that I have to the winner-take-all shift, the concerns that I have about the federal narrative. And I actually am a little bit shocked. Somebody mentioned that we were trending on Twitter. Well, X, formerly known as Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And I went ahead and pulled it up, and it's pretty fascinating, the things that are being talked about right now with regards to Nebraska. It's always fun when we're the centerpiece of conversation. I think a lot of people are unfamiliar with some of our customs, and people are unfamiliar with some of the things we do here. But when you have people causing the antics that you see online, hyping up a bunch of trolls and things like that, bringing them into the Nebraska Twitter sphere, I think it's always kind of fun to see. So I can't say that I would recommend reading some of the things that are being said, but certainly it's interesting. So by all means, if you feel so inclined, feel free to hop on X, formerly known as Twitter, and see the things that are being talked about here. But that being said, I think Senator Jacobson actually hit the nail on the head here. There's a number of things contained in LB 1300 and the forthcoming committee amendment that are actually really, really positive. And we've seen this with other bills that have come through on the floor where you have a number of things contained in a committee amendment that ultimately get drag, or they have an anchor by virtue of something else that people have an issue with. And that happens. We're not all going to agree on everything all the time. But what usually happens in those circumstances is the process works. And so by virtue of what we are doing tonight, we are talking about what should and should not be included as an amendment. I'm sure there will be conversations about what is and is not germane, but that is the process. And it's interesting because people sometimes lament the process when it's inconvenient to their ultimate goal. But when it benefits what they're looking for, they are a fan of how the process works. And so I think it's important we all keep in mind that the process works for and against us, but it does so equally. And I think that's helpful. I was perusing the bill and the committee amendment, and I'm actually really interested in a number of the things that are contained in that committee amendment that hopefully gets attached down the way here. One of those that was pointed out to me by a staff member who worked on this was LB 887. And I don't know if LB 887 has been talked about a lot here, but I was reading the committee statement on LB 887 and how it's tweaked in here. And what it says is this bill is going to create a grant program to facilitate the development and improvement of security measures at Nebraska nonprofit organizations. And on first blush, I thought to myself, well, why would that be necessary? And what it essentially does is through the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency, it provides these grants for eligible organizations who have an application for federal nonprofit security grants to ensure, it sounds like, that those grants have money in order to ensure their safety. What's fascinating about this is if you scroll down in the committee statement, you'll see the people that came in as testifiers. And this was introduced, it looks like, by Senator Brewer, and he was followed by people. I don't know what that noise was. For people at home, there was a funny noise in the background. Senator Brewer introduced this bill and was then followed by representatives from congressmen, was followed by the Anti-Defamation League, was followed by Jewish Community Relations Council, the Nebraska Catholic Conference, and Out Nebraska.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. What I know from my relatively short time in the legislature is that when you bring a bill that ultimately gets voted into a package with near unanimous support, the only one not voting there was a senator who couldn't make it to the vote, it sounds like, and you have that kind of bipartisan and nonpartisan support with no people testifying against it, it's usually a good idea. And so I think it's really important that we do everything we can to ensure that those nonprofits are able to benefit from this grant, to ensure they have security and safety. Certainly, we need to make sure that people who are exercising their First Amendment rights to speech and to be involved in politics feel safe while doing so. And when you have that many people from different sides of the spectrum getting together and talking about the importance of that safety, I think it's something that we need to act on at the legislature. So, colleagues, I hope that we can get to that committee amendment. I think it's vital that we address some of these concerns, and I want to thank my colleagues for discussing both parts of the bill and kind of what this process is here tonight, so that way people understand. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Dungan. Senator Day, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, colleagues. I rise again in support of LB 1300 and opposed to the IPP motion. However, we are taking time to avoid getting to what is down the list, which we know is the amendment to include winner take all in this bill. As I mentioned the last time on the mic, this winner take all bill is a bill that's been introduced, as Senator Slama said many times. It was sitting in committee this whole session for 54 days out of 60 days in the session. And now all of a sudden with 6 days left, we're all in a rush fire hurry to try to get this passed to dilute the vote of our own constituents. And sometimes I wish people would take this job a little more seriously. I feel like the fact that we have political pundits, essentially, and a former president sending out tweets or truths or whatever they are, wanting this to get passed, and us scrambling to make that happen is a sign that, like, we don't take what we're doing here very seriously. Like, this is serious business. We're literally talking about changing the way we elect the president of the country. If you live in CD2, if you represent a legislative district in CD2, you will be diluting the vote of your own constituents, and really any congressional district. What happens at some point when Democrat votes outweigh Republican votes? Is everybody going to want to change it back? like moving further away from a one person, one vote system is anti-democracy. And that's what this bill does. By allocating electoral votes based on congressional districts, Nebraska ensures that each region within the state has a say in the outcome of the presidential election. This fosters a sense of inclusivity and representation that might otherwise be absent in a winner-take-all system. It acknowledges the diversity of opinions and perspectives within our state, promoting a more nuanced and balanced approach to governance. As I said before, if any of you go to the doors of your constituents and you actually have conversations with them, people are sick and tired of the fighting and the infighting within parties. Frankly, they're sick of political parties. Nobody wants us to push ourselves further into tribalism within politics. People don't want that. And as Senator Hunt mentioned, I think that reading the tweet that came from Donald Trump illuminates the fact that he has no idea what he's talking about when he's talking about Nebraska politics. Like he knows what the people in Nebraska want? Give me a break. But he doesn't know that we have a unicameral? Give me a break. Furthermore, Nebraska's split electoral system encourages presidential candidates to campaign in areas that they might otherwise overlook. In a winner-takes-all scenario, candidates often focus their efforts on swing states, neglecting others where the outcome seems predetermined. However, by dividing its electoral votes, Nebraska forces candidates to engage with constituents across the state, listening to their concerns and crafting policies that resonate with a broader spectrum of the population. Doesn't that sound great? Isn't that what we're always talking about? One of the benefits of the unicameral system is it forces us to work together with each other. Isn't that the type of thing that we should be fostering within electoral politics? Forcing candidates to work with a broader swath of the population, regardless of which end of the political spectrum they stand on. This approach not only ensures that Nebraska's interests are heard, but also promotes political Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Day. Senator Sanders, you recognize.
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. President. I stand here today to introduce LB 1300, which is in the package. My bill is LB 442 originally, that was introduced in 2021 by Senator Matt Hansen as LB 442. This amendment is supported by Governor Pillen and bipartisan support. The commission will have 14 voting members appointed by the governor of Asian ancestry. Members will serve 4-year term. This is an annual cost, and the fiscal note is nearly identical to the comparable commissions. The commission would cost the state $255,000 annually. The Asian American community in Nebraska comprises of 3.5% of Nebraska residents, and they are the fastest growing minority group in the state. This includes descendants from over 20 Asian countries and those who claim multiple races. The Asian American community in Nebraska has a tremendous impact on our state. Asian Americans are enthusiastic contributors to our workforce, and Nebraskans enjoy products of Asian American culture ranging from cuisine to public events and holidays. We see their impact in Nebraska sports, like the Nebraska basketball player Kaisa Tominaga, represented in Japan in the 2021 Olympic Games in 3-on-3 basketball. Additionally, Asian American countries contribute greatly to our security of our state and nation. At Offutt Air Force Base in my district, 2% of the workforce there identifies as Asian. We work closely with countries such as Japan and the Philippines to defend the United States' interests at home and abroad. This bill has a personal meaning to me as a senator of Asian descent. My parental family came from the Philippines in the 1920s to work in the sugarcane industry in Hawaii, then on their own coffee farm also on the island of Hawaii. I am fortunate to connect with the Nebraska Filipino community in my district and learn more about their own heritage. Thank you for your time and attentiveness, and I welcome the opportunity to any questions you may need answered. Please vote green when the time comes on AM 3227 and LB 1300. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Senator Blood, you're recognized, and this is your third time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fellow Senators, friends all. I am indifferent about the IPP motion. Once all the issues are resolved with LB 1300, I will likely be in support. With that, I would ask Senator Sanders to yield to a question.
Senator Sanders, will you yield?
I sure will. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Senator Sanders, I agree that this would be a great commission to start. But my concern is you said the governor will be the one that appoints the 14 on that commission. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's how the process works, and then the legislature.
I'm going based on what you said. I thought you said 14, and I could be incorrect. So do you have concerns about his xenophobic attack on the Flatwater press gal that wrote an accurate story about nitrates in the water that came from Pillen Farms? And when interviewed about it, he said that the author is from communist China. What more do you need to know? Do you think that it's appropriate that we would allow the governor to then appoint people to a committee where it's really our job to embrace a culture?
I think that's why this committee is an important piece of Nebraska, because the Asian community is so great and from 20 different countries. It's even hard in my own family to distinguish what countries they come from. But I think this is the purpose of the commission, is to educate, number one.
So when there's a xenophobic attack in the future, then maybe we'd have a commission much like the Congressional Commission who came out against our governor, saying that indeed he made a xenophobic attack on the young woman. So do you anticipate that should our governor do that again, that this commission would be able to do that?
I think the commission could certainly educate the question around that. Absolutely.
And how would you see that happening?
Well, first to decide if the word communist is used from any country, that can certainly happen. So you need to divide that question, right? And who is the question? Where is it coming from and what country?
What were your feelings on that statement as a Filipino American?
I hear quotes and statements all the time that are incorrect. Because I'm Filipino from Hawaii, they assume I'm 100% Hawaiian.
Fair.
So, right?
I heard somebody ask Senator Vargas 2 days ago when we were in line for tacos that one of the senators was looking to him to learn how to make a taco. I mean, I hear dumb stuff in this body a lot. And Senator Vargas is such a good man to not punch that guy in the face. So my concern with your bill is not that you're forming this commission. I am 110% behind it. My concern is that, unfortunately, when we have these commissions, it is the governor that appoints. And should you guys end up having any type of coffers and down the road they need to steal more money, will they steal money from your group? So I do support what you're trying to do, but I have some concerns. And I appreciate you, because I didn't get a chance to get to you to tell you I was going to be talking to you about this. So I appreciate you answering the questions. Thank you, Senator Sanders. And so I am looking at parts of the amendments that I like. I have concerns about some of the things in the underlying bill. Sometimes I feel like Nebraska takes big bites of things they don't clearly understand, and that is a concern for me. But mostly the concern that I have is, we were a national embarrassment when it came to the words of our governor in reference to a young lady who was only doing her job, who was here in Nebraska, doing the research, doing the hard work. And I don't remember an apology ever being made. And now we want this person, who is our leader in chief, the head of the state, to now appoint people to this committee. And it kind of makes my stomach turn a little bit. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Frederickson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, colleagues. Looking at the board I rise today, I believe in support of LB 1300. I think this has been said a few times on the mic tonight that I think a lot of hard work and thoughtfulness has gone into this bill. I think there's a lot of good amendments on this bill. The forthcoming amendment hopefully will get on the board and we'll be able to advance this piece of legislation, which I think, as I said earlier, the executive branch, Senator Bostar, a number of folks who have bills on here, Senator Jacobson, Senator Sanders, have all put a lot of work into these bills, and I'm hopeful that we can get that across the board. So we're getting down to the last few days of the session, and certainly we have late nights, and it kind of becomes a little bit of a, what I refer to sometimes as a silly season. And as Senator Hunt mentioned earlier, game recognized game. I think Senator Slama's pulling some shenanigans here, which is, I think, added something to the bingo card that I didn't have on this year's bingo card, and I made a pretty robust one given last session. So I'll speak briefly about the potential amendment about winner take all. I think that this has been, just to speak, I think very frankly and directly about this, when I started getting texts about this from reporters, like I think it was a day ago or it was yesterday, and at first I was a little confused as to why I was getting these texts, and I later came to realize that this was because someone had tweeted about this on social media, and my initial thought was, well, this is fascinating because we have such limited amount of time. We have very ambitious goals this session. And I think as we've been debating the last few days with LB 388 and some of the legislation we debated earlier today. And so my initial response was, well, no, I don't know where any of this idea would come from. This doesn't have a priority designation. This is not out of committee. This is not been named as a priority of the legislature this year. And apparently this tweet, or I don't know what platform it exactly was sent on, but this was sent out and it kind of put everyone into a little bit of a scramble, it seems. And, that has been, it's been a fascinating thing to watch because, we're a legislative body. And we are not supposed to make policy based on tweets. And I've talked on the mic before in here about one of the more challenging things that isn't frequently publicly talked about being in politics is there's a lot of pressure. We have pressure from constituents. We have pressure from various stakeholders in the industries, and depending on what committees we sit on, we hear a lot from different lobbyists, et cetera. And we have pressure from each other. But I think one of the most savage things out there on a national level is the amount of bullying that happens in politics. And what worries me is the disintegration of distress tolerance, the disintegration of, thank you, Mr. President, of being able to have a thicker skin, because the only way to stop a bully is to stop the bully. We don't have to bend over as a legislative body, a serious deliberative body, the only deliberative body in the state, because an incel tween tweeted something. I don't know if we're going to get to vote on this tonight. It's almost 8 o'clock. We'll hopefully adjourn by 10, but I'm not going to live my life based on what's said on Twitter. I take this job a lot more seriously.
That's your time.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Frederickson. Senator Walls, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield my time to Senator Iba. I'm just kidding. I get that. I got that from Senator Justin Wayne. He does that all the time. I thought I'd try it. I'm going to yield my time to Senator Dungan.
Senator Dungan, you're yielded 4 minutes and 35 seconds.
I don't understand, thank you, Mr. President, why it would not be funny for me to talk. I talk so little. It seems like that'd be a funny joke, too, to yield time to me. No, I appreciate the time, Senator Walls. She asked if I'd like a little more time to talk about the bill and to talk about the underlying parts of LB 1300. And I said yes, because I think it's important that we continue to talk about that as well. As I said, I'm sure that we will get to a further discussion about winner take all versus not supporting that. But in going through what's going to be eventually contained in the committee amendment, there was another one in here that I thought was of particular interest, and that is seemingly wrapping in LB 1243, introduced by Senator McDonald, into the body of LB 1300 with a committee amendment. And what that is it's adopting the Wildland Fire Response Act. And yet again, I opened up the committee statement to make sure I could fully understand it. And it's a bill that has 7 aye votes, no votes, and no present not voting votes, and only, it looks like, a litany of support. And then I think there was 1 neutral testimony, but no opponents. So yet again, when you see a bill that comes up on a committee statement with that kind of universal support and that kind of universal proponent testimony, it usually means it means 2 things. 1, it means it's a good bill usually because it doesn't have a lot of opposition and it seems like it's just a good idea. And it also means that whoever introduced that bill did a good job of coordinating their testimony and making sure and coordinating their bill to make sure there was no opposition. For those who don't know, when you're getting a bill ready, in my opinion, if you really want to do it right, you'd spend quite a bit of time in the crafting of the bill, talking to the stakeholders and trying to identify what sticking points there might be for those who would oppose it. If it's at all possible, I think it's generally best practice to try to address those concerns ahead of time, whether that's during the interim or once the bill's been dropped and people have expressed concerns. Because if you're able to address a lot of those problems up front, you generally find yourself in a position where you're not going to get as much drag. If you have a hearing and let's say, these 10 people come in and testify for it, but you get 10 to 15 people opposed to it, that's going to cause a lot of pause for the committee. That's going to cause a lot of pause for other individuals in the legislature because we do rely on these committee statements pretty heavily. So I opened this up and I saw there was no opponents, and it looks like we had testimony from a vast number of our great firefighters across the state of Nebraska, and specifically firefighters who are in not some urban districts like here in Omaha or Lincoln, but rather we have the State Volunteer Firefighters Association coming in to testify. We have the Shadron Volunteer Fire Department. We have the Platte Valley Twin Loop Task Force coming in to testify, Fairbury Rural Fire Department. And so this clearly was a bill that does a good job seemingly addressing the concerns of some of the firefighters and the volunteer firefighters in greater Nebraska. And essentially what this does is it creates the Wildland Incident Response Assistant Team in the Office of the State Fire Marshal. I would have a few questions exactly as to what their duties are, but I don't see Senator McDonald here, so I won't ask him those questions, but hopefully we can, thank you, Mr. President, have a little bit more conversation. But from my review of the bill, it really does seem like what this is doing is it's creating an additional response team within the Office of the State Fire Marshal, ensuring that they're being compensated appropriately, ensuring that they have the equipment that's needed for the wildland fire incidents that they have to deal with. And it seems like a really good idea for us as the state of Nebraska to continue to support our first responders, not just in Lincoln, not just in Omaha, but across the entirety of the state. We had a good conversation earlier this week about ensuring that all of our first responders and police officers have retirement. We have to make sure we do the same thing with making sure they have the proper support and the proper teams to fight the fights they have out there. So again, generally supportive of this bill, supportive of the committee amendment, I believe, once it gets up here, and supportive of what I found in LB 1243. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Dungan. Senator John Kavanaugh, you're recognized, and this is your third time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just recording for posterity. Okay, so I appreciate what Senator Dungan was saying. I think there's generally a lot of good stuff in this bill. I've been talking mostly about the necessity for making sure that we are securing our soft targets, as you'd call it. And I was thinking about when I was talking earlier that one of the things I made reference to was could have a cascading failure that would go from, say, Nebraska, or probably more likely be somewhere in the middle, but since we're in Nebraska, we'll talk about Nebraska, and cause a cascading failure that goes all the way from here down to Key West. And then that made me think, I was talking to somebody about famous former Key West resident Jimmy Buffett, and Bo knows what I'm talking about. Bo knows Buffett. So Jimmy Buffett, who is a famous musician who has since passed away, unfortunately. He died about a year ago, actually just in the last year, September 2023. Got his start at a bar in Key West and had such great hits as Cheeseburger in Paradise, He Went to Paris, well, one thing I was talking about is changes in latitude, changes in attitude, which I thought was it's like a great phrase for like changing your location can help change your perspective. Things look differently when you're sitting up in the chair, like Mr. President up there. I'm sure he's got a unique perspective on everything that transpires out in the rotunda here, in the body. And if you're out in the rotunda looking in the glass, different perspective, and you're off on the sides under the balconies, different perspective. And then the light comes down, again, change of perspective. So sometimes where you stand depends on where you sit is another great phrase about perspective relative to location. That is one that says, I think, speaks for the proposition that you might support something if you are a member of the group that it affects, or you might oppose something because it is you're a member of the group that it affects. So, where you stand depends on where you sit. So those are interesting things. This is relevant again. So I know it can be a circuitous journey, but the fact that we're talking about the Pacific threat assessment or Pacific threat, Senator Ballard's walked off when I was going to ask him again. I keep forgetting to ask him what the actual name is. I wanted to say Pacific, is it Pacific Pet Insurance? No, it's Pacific Pet Insurance. Anyway, but we're talking about threats relative to location. So, and the threat in this particular case we're talking about is from particularly threats that come out of the Pacific Rim. Not that we're not worried about threats that maybe come from other locations. And of course, the United States has enemies in other places. I remember on Senator Hardin's bill, where I learned about the list of national security threat list, which included North Korea, I think it included China, companies owned by China, it included Russia, and it included, this was the one that surprised me, Nicolas Maduro, who is the head of state of Venezuela. So it's not the state of Venezuela. It is Nicolas Maduro and his subsidiaries or companies. So, in this case, we're talking about threats that have an origin from a specific location and not necessarily, or, threats from a specific ideology or group. We're talking about it just more as a regional threat. I would say that the redundancy and resiliency in the reporting end of this bill, I would imagine will help protect us from threats regardless of their geographic origin. At the beginning of this bill, I think Senator Blood asked Senator Bostar what we meant by Pacific, and he said I think it was the Pacific Ocean on the planet Earth or something along those lines. I thought was a great summary of what we meant. But anyway, I think that the threats that will be addressed by this are not only those coming from the Pacific region. It would be any threats from anywhere. I think the precipitating event is perhaps threats that are originating there, but we will build in redundancies for other locations. But just always remember, changes in latitude, changes in attitude. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Dungan, you're recognized.
Thank you.
Your third time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Changes in latitude reflect changes in attitude. Is that what you just said? Latitude and attitude. Okay. This is legislature after dark. We have found ourselves at 8 o'clock where we're talking about those kind of things, which I appreciate. Now, colleagues, I do rise again to continue to look into this bill. I think it's important that we continue to have a conversation about some of the things that are contained in this and contained in both the original LB 1300, but also some of the bills that are contained in the committee amendment. I'm just making sure I pull it up here. Another one that I wanted to highlight here is LB 1048. This is one that was also introduced by Senator Bostar. I believe Senator Bostar, the primary introducer of LB 1300, has a few bills that are in this, but this is a bill that essentially has to do, as I understand it, with the standards that surround the cybersecurity and the infrastructure security of chemical facilities in Nebraska. These are the kind of things that actually I think are some of the most important things that we do here in the legislature that aren't really things people think about until it's in front of them. I was talking with, again, I mentioned this earlier on the mic for anybody who's been paying attention all day. I talked to a group of students earlier, and they asked me, how often do you and your fellow senators all vote the same on an issue? And I thought about that, and the reality of the situation is we actually find ourselves voting all the same on a vast majority of the issues that we have before us, because what a lot of the public doesn't see, if they're not tuning into some of the more salacious debates, is that a lot of what we do here in the body is pass measures and put forward measures like LB 1048. It's not usually going to make a headline. It's not usually going to be something that I think catches the attention on Twitter, and it may not be something that gets a lot of debate, but for an opportunity like today where we actually have time to delve into this. But bills like LB 1048 really are the kind of things that we do to make Nebraska stronger, to make Nebraska better, and clearly, as seems to be the underlying theme of this entire package, to make Nebraska safer. And so what LB 1048 does is it proposes requiring certain chemical facilities in Nebraska to participate in a federal program relating to cybersecurity and infrastructure security. The bill specifically defines chemical facility and federal standards by reference to federal regulation. And it looks like it also further defines federal agency so as to refer to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency of the United States Department of Homeland Security. The bill includes legislative findings related to the necessity of security measures for those chemical facilities, and the NEMA, the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency, and the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy are then directed to publish the mandated requirements on their agency websites. There's changes, I think it looks like, that were made by the committee that ultimately clarify the bill's mandate on chemical facilities applies to such facilities that were previously subject to the expired federal program. I'd imagine that was in order to not cause an overly burdensome or onerous requirement on the entities that weren't previously subject to that. The amendment also then goes further to clarify that the state mandate would be preempted if the federal standards are then reauthorized by Congress. So, to put that simply, it sounds like there were federal standards that were in place with regards to both cybersecurity and infrastructure security for chemical facilities. Those federal standards, it sounds like, lapsed or for some reason did not apply. And what this bill says is if you were previously subject to those rules and requirements with regards to your security, thank you, Mr. President, you are once again you're going to be required to do that up until the point in time in which you're preempted by federal standards when they're once again reauthorized by Congress. So what I like about this bill, again, it's simple. It's not salacious. It's not something that you're going to probably hear a lot of people talk about. There were no opponents. I only see one proponent on here. These are the good governance bills that we actually focus on. And I really wish the people of Nebraska had an opportunity to see that most of the time we're doing things that keep the lights on, that keep things safe, and we're actually agreeing with each other. So I hope that we can finally get to that amendment at some point and have a conversation about some of these other bills that keep us safer and ensure a better Nebraska. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Duncan. Senator Vargas, you're recognized.
Thank you. Rise in support of LB 1300. I think I'm against the IPP, I guess, right now. I just don't really like IPPs too much, but I also am in support of some of the amendments, so I want to make sure to rise against that. We're not yet discussing the other underlying bill, which I want to make sure we maintain the traditions that we currently have in our unicameral system in terms of how we split our electoral votes and are earned. I think it's good in terms of revenue, and I think it's also good in terms of representation on all sides and all political aisles. But I just wanted to rise in support of the underlying bill. Appreciate Senator Bostar for his work, and hopefully we will get to continue to work on some more work here up until 10 o'clock. As somebody was saying earlier, not always amazing things happen after 8 o'clock. Much fewer people here on the floor. Energy is much lower, but there's still work that we're trying to get done for the sake of the state. So again, appreciate everyone and appreciate Senator Bostar, and support the underlying amendment and see where we continue to go from here.
Thank you, Senator Vargas. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry, colleagues, I was out in the rotunda. So there's a lot of moving pieces happening here and a lot of conversations about procedure and what to do on this and where are the votes on this piece of the procedure and where are the votes on this piece of the procedure. And I'm just going to lay it out for you all. I don't trust you. I don't trust the Republicans in this body at all, except for Senator Slama. I do trust you. I don't trust you. You don't keep your word to me. So this might be a trauma response, but you have destroyed so much trust over the course of 6 years. And then this morning, you decimated it. You decimated it. And I am being pressured by everyone on every side to trust you. But you don't deserve it. You do not deserve my trust. And I can salvage Senator Bostar's bill. And I can salvage getting the committee amendment on there. You have done this. Senator Slama hasn't done this, and I haven't done this. You have done this. You have brought this on yourselves. Senator Slama is trying to get you on the record. You're not? Oh, okay. And I don't trust you. And you have screwed both of us over in a million different ways. And we are in conflict on our goals right now. But we agree you're not trustworthy. Well, I'm not going to speak for her. She can say if she agrees with that or not. You're not. You're not trustworthy. I went into the lounge to talk to a couple of you, and you told me you were voting a different way than you told Senator Wayne. And I'm supposed to trust you. This is democracy. Democracy is on the line, and I am supposed to trust you, and Democrats want me to trust you, and they want to move this forward. I want to throw up, and I want to go to bed, but I can't because I don't trust you, and you don't deserve to be trusted. There are so many knives in my back and in my stomach and in my heart from all of you, repeatedly, publicly, today. I don't trust you. I'd like a call of the House and a roll call vote.
There's been a request to place the House under call. The question is, shall the House go under call? All those in favor vote aye. All opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk?
20 ayes, 0 nays, place House under call, Mr. President.
The House is under call. Senators, please record your presence. Those unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. Senators Wishart, Michaela Cavanaugh, Senator Linehan, Senator DeBoer, Senator Halloran, McDonald, Wayne, please check in. The House is under call. Senator DeBoer, would you check in, please? Thank you. All unexcused members are present. A roll call vote has been requested. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Aguilar. Senator Albright. Voting no. Senator Arch. Voting no. Senator Armendariz. Senator Ballard. Voting no. Senator Blood. Voting yes. Senator Boston. Voting no. Senator Bostar. Voting no. Senator Bostelman. Voting no. Senator Brandt. Voting no. Senator Brewer. Voting no. Senator John Kavanaugh. Not voting. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. Not voting. Senator Clements. Voting no. Senator Conrad. Voting no. Senator Day. Voting no. Senator DeBoer. Voting no. Senator DeKay. Voting no. Senator Dorn. Voting no. Senator Dover. Voting no. Senator Dungan. Voting no. Senator Erdman. Voting no. Senator Frederickson. Voting no. Senator Halloran. Voting no. Senator Hansen. Senator Hardin. Voting no. Senator Holcroft. Voting no. Senator Hughes. Voting no. Senator Hunt. Not voting. Senator Ibaugh. Voting no. Senator Jacobson. Voting no. Senator Kauth. Voting no. Senator Linehan. Voting no. Senator Lippincott. Voting no. Senator Lowe. Voting no. Senator McDonald. Voting no. Senator McKinney. Voting no. Senator Meyer. Voting no. Senator Mosier. Voting no. Senator Merman. Voting no. Senator Raybold. Senator Reapy. Voting no. Senator Sanders. Voting no. Senator Slama. Voting no. Senator Vargas. Voting no. Senator Von Gillern. Voting no. Senator Walls. Voting no. Senator Wayne. Voting no. Senator Wishart. Voting no. Vote is 1A, 41 nays, Mr. President, on the indefinitely postponed motion.
The motion is not successful. I raise the call. Mr. Clerk, for a motion.
Mr. President, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh would move to reconsider the vote just taken on MO 1339.
Senator Kavanaugh, you're welcome to open on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am being asked to take leap of faith when I have no faith. That is very hard. There are a lot of things that have transpired in this body, vote-wise, that I have disagreed with. But this is bigger than me. It's bigger than all of us. And whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong, I don't have faith that the people in this body will honor the vote card. And that is a reflection on you. Because my first few years, I ran vote cards all the time. I would run them for the speakers because my vote cards were always solid. They were always solid. But now people lie to my face, lie to each other's faces. And I just don't know how to trust you at all. Do you know how many people from the exec board have talked to me about what happened in the exec board? 2. I had the votes. I had the votes to get my resolution out of that committee. And now you want me to trust you on something even bigger. You want me to trust you. And Democrats want me to trust you.
Okay, sorry.
I clearly have no choice because no one else is going to stand with me. And if this trust fall fails, I will say that you all have failed democracy. You already showed that you are cowards. You already sat silent this morning and 2 weeks ago. You lied to me. I had the votes. But I am standing alone. I withdraw my motion.
Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, General File, Legislative Bill 1300, introduced by Senator Bostar. at the request of the governor. This bill for enacting into government adopts the Pacific Conflict Stress Test Act and the Foreign Adversary Contracting Prohibition Act, provides severability and declares an emergency. Bill is read for the first time on January 16th of this year, referred to the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with committee amendments, Mr. President.
Senator Brewer, you're recognized to open on the committee amendment.
Committee amendment, Brewer. Committee amendment.
Holy cow. I didn't know we were actually at this. All right, AM, yeah, I'm in the right book. That's good. AM 3227. Again, this is amendment to 1300. It was heard on February 8th. The proponents were the Lieutenant Governor, DAS, Congressman Flood's office, and a whole bunch of folks from the National Security. There was some opposition from electric utilities and Black Hills Energy, and we've worked with them to try and fix those issues. The vote out of committee was 6-0-1. AM 3227 makes a committee priority bill, and it combines the following bills: LB 2 from Senator Sanders, which is the Asian American Commission, LB 869er, and that is Senator Bostar's bill to allow the county veteran service officers to assist more of our veterans, especially those from the National Guard. 887, which is mine, which grants has grants from NEMA to nonprofits to help with security issues. LB 1048 from Senator Bostar to restore certain security protocols for chemical facilities in Nebraska. And 1243, Senator McDonald's, and has established a team in the office of the State Fire Marshal to coordinate wildland fire response. And lastly, LB 1358 from Senator McDonald, and that is to cap salaries of some of our political subdivisions. With that, I would ask your support on AM 3227 and on LB 1300. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brewer. Mr. Clerk, for a motion.
Mr. President, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh would move to bracket Legislative Bill 1300 until April 18th.
Senator Cavanaugh, you're welcome to open on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm taking a leap of faith that none of you deserve. I will withdraw my motion and the next one.
So ordered.
Yep.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Slama would move to amend with AM 3339.
Senator Slama, you're recognized to open on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good evening, colleagues. I'm grateful we can finally get to this moment and debate AM 3339, which is the text of LB 764, to bring winner take all to the state of Nebraska. As many of you know, I've been a leader on this issue. I introduced winner take all in 2021. And given recent events that have been referenced this evening, there seems to be a renewed national interest in how Nebraska apportions our votes in presidential elections. In 1991, we switched to our current system, which I believe unfairly makes Nebraska a split state. 48 other states have a system in which they do not divide their electoral votes. Nebraska is one of two, along with Maine. This means that unless we have a close race with one Democratic candidate or Republican candidate being close in an election, we are rendered to irrelevancy. To argue that there is economic impact from the blue dot is not accurate. There have been 2 times where the Omaha 2nd Congressional District has been in play for a presidential election, and I would argue that the city of Omaha probably gets as much revenue and interest as they do when people come and stay in Omaha versus Council Bluffs when candidates come to visit there. But we have had a renewed national interest in winner take all, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that people who failed to show up to the committee hearing and actually advocate for this early on in 2023 when Senator Lippincott, who's taken the reins and has been a great champion for this bill, didn't show up and testify in favor of the bill, weren't nearly this fired up in 2021 when I brought the bill. And I want to take this to a vote. There are a lot of people on both the state and national level saying we should do this. And there are a bunch of my colleagues who argue that we should do this, but when the rubber meets the road, where do you stand? Republicans all too often can talk the talk, but they can't walk the walk and actually get the thing they're seeking achieved. Well, here, we have an opportunity to do it now. I would encourage you all to vote green on AM 3339. I anticipate there to be a back and forth on germaneness, and we'll have that discussion. But you know what? Winner take all needs to be discussed on the floor. We've had our current system since 1991. We nearly got rid of it in 2016 when one person switched their vote. And now we're back under a national spotlight with people wondering why we apportion presidential votes the way we do. Many would argue it does not make sense. It makes sense in the same vein as when candidates for Congress sign a term limits pledge and then self-regulate themselves out of office after a certain number of terms. You water down your influence. Nebraska waters down their influence when other states have not followed Nebraska's lead when it comes to the apportionment of presidential votes. So what we will likely do is have a germaneness challenge, and that'll be up on the board because somebody will make a motion to overrule the chair. I would anticipate that would be me. And make no mistake about it, that vote on your motion to overrule the chair is your vote on winner take all. We're going to find out where you stand. You cannot hide behind this being just a procedural vote. You will be called out for what it is. The state is watching. The country is watching. We have the numbers. I believe we have the numbers. So let's finally get this done and ensure that Nebraska is apportioning its presidential votes in a winner-take-all system, just like the other 48 states in the country, excluding Maine, and the way we used to do it prior to 1991. I look forward to this debate. I'm hopeful that more people will get in the queue, but we'll see. I'd anticipate we get to a vote on this tonight, but just know you're not going to be able to hide behind procedural hoops to say, well, you know, I support winner take all, just not in this situation, not in this bill. And we'll talk about why this amendment is germane, why it does fulfill the single subject rule if we were to attach it. We'll handle all of those arguments in due time. But just know this vote, this is where you can walk the walk instead of just talking the talk. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Slama. Senator Bostar, for what purpose do you rise?
Challenge germaneness of AM 3339.
Senator Bostar, Senator Slama, and Speaker Arch, please approach. Members, I would rule that the amendment is not germane to the bill. Senator Slama, for what purpose do you rise?
Motion to overrule the chair.
It's a ruling of the chair that the amendment is not germane. Senator Slama has moved to overrule the chair. Each senator will be allowed to speak one time. There's no yielding time. Senator Slama, you're welcome to open on your motion to overrule the chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. You did a great job of outlining that. Special thank you to Brandon for ensuring we're sticking to procedure here. We're now in a motion to overrule. Germaneness on this amendment has been challenged. I would argue that we've been very intentional in the legislature about how we handle germaneness. And amending the text of LB 764 into this bill fulfills the requirement that the legislature has set for ourselves in what germaneness means. This bill came out of the government committee. The bill we are considering now came out of the government committee. If somebody's going to argue that it wasn't germane and therefore it violates the single subject rule, you can't argue that either, because after general file, once this amendment would be attached, the title of the bill would be adjusted to reflect the inclusion of winner take all into this package of bills, into LB 1300. So as long as that title includes winner take all and select, we're covered in terms of the single subject rule as well. And that's why I think a lot of people miss a little bit of the nuance. I know my post on Twitter saying that adding LB 764 wouldn't necessarily be germane. I think that really does miss out on the nuance of what I was trying to get at, which is very simple in that germaneness means what we want it to mean in the Nebraska legislature. The courts have largely upheld at how we choose to regulate ourselves. And if we have the votes, odds are the courts will rule that it is germane. So if you want winner take all in the state of Nebraska, this is your chance. This is the last train out of the station. There are no other government bills that this can be attached to reasonably. There are a bunch of motions and amendments filed on every other logical bill to attach it to. I'm fine with illogical, it being attached to illogical bills. I think if we fail in this motion to overrule, which again, this is your vote on the record for winner take all, where you stand on winner take all, and that if we can't overrule the chair here, I can't imagine this passing on any other bill yet this session. So I would ask that you stand with me in ruling this amendment to be germane, because this is the last chance to pass winner take all in this session. This is the best chance we have to pass winner take all this session, and odds are it will be the best chance we have to pass winner take all for the next several years. We have a tough legislative cycle coming up, so to pretend that we would have the same strong numbers that we have this year, next year, is very unlikely. We have the chance to seize the moment here and actually vote for what we believe. I know it's easy to send out emails and say you support this issue and get people fired up about it, knowing that it's not going to go anywhere. But when you actually have the chance to vote on this issue, where will you stand? I'm asking each of you on the floor to stand with me and have the courage to vote for winner take all, to have your actions match your words, and to not hide behind, oh, well, procedurally, I just couldn't. I mean, I'm worried. What if we only get 31 votes? Are you kidding me? If you're going to send out fundraising emails saying democracy is at stake, send out Twitter posts saying we have to do this because the presidency is at risk, and you don't think that's important enough to hit your green button and take a vote because it might risk the bill? If this issue is important to you, if you are going to put out tweets and say, I support winner take all, here's your chance to vote for it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Slama. Senator Bostar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, colleagues. So just to kind of go over a little bit where we are. So the motion is to overrule the chair. The chair ruled that the amendment was not germane. So overruling the chair is to say that it is germane. And so what I am asking for is anything but an affirmative vote. So the way this works is it is a majority of those present. I'm just kind of looking at the clerk just for another nod. Yeah, because there was some question about this that I had, not the clerk. So right now, with the number of individuals checked in, it would take 23 green votes to overrule the chair. If we care at all about the bills within LB 1300, if we care at all about the legislation in the committee amendment that the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee put together, it is imperative that we do not reach 23 green votes. If we do reach 23 green votes, the whole thing is dead. It's that simple. Colleagues, you will all have an opportunity to vote on winner take all, the apportionment of the electoral vote in the state of Nebraska. I'm confident in it. I'm sure of it. There will be an opportunity. Senator Lippincott introduced that legislation. It's gotten a lot of attention recently, of course, and I believe there will be an opportunity for us to vote on it. I don't think this is the way. This is, strictly speaking, a motion to overrule the chair. And this is a motion to kill a package of bills out of the Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs Committee. If we get to 23 greens, it's all dead. So colleagues, what I'm asking for is to vote no or don't vote, so that we can advance LB 1300. There will be other opportunities to bring up the legislation that has garnered so much attention right now. But there are veterans who are relying on this bill. Our own state security is relying on this bill. Firefighters, wildland firefighters are relying on this bill. A lot of good work has gone into this, and a lot of people are counting on us to see this through. So colleagues, I am begging you, don't kill this whole package. It doesn't deserve it. The people who will be helped by it don't deserve it. Please do not vote green. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Senator Wayne, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just for those who are wondering about the germaneness and why it's not germane, there's 8 bills in this, and none of them open up chapter 32, and there's no logical conclusion from the bills that are in this to chapter 32 or to the underlying amendment. So there's just no connection at all. Will Senator Brewer yield to a question?
Senator Brewer, will you yield?
Yes.
Is this still in your committee?
Yes,
Has it been voted out of your committee?
it has not. It did not have a priority and therefore did not have a path ahead.
Thank you. Colleagues, I talk about germaneness all the time. I even try to figure out how we can do things and open up the germaneness sometimes, but this doesn't open up anywhere close to that section of chapters. It's not germane at all. So again, I am asking for what am I asking for? I'm so used to me overruling the chair. I'm asking for a red vote or present not voting on your sheet. So a red vote or present not voting on your sheet. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Seeing no one else in the queue, it is the ruling of the chair that the amendment, I'm sorry, Senator Slama to close.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I agree. I can see the writing on the wall here. I'm pretty sure I can accurately predict what's going to happen. I think that we're going to continue getting emails saying the future of our country is at stake, donate money to blank cause to bring winner take all to the state of Nebraska. People who are sitting here and are probably going to be present not voting, because I doubt y'all have the courage to vote no, are going to add on to that, and when they're at their county conventions, they're going to say, of course I support winner take all. Oh my gosh, it's just the silliest thing ever that this is how we apportion our votes in presidential elections. And when given the chance to actually vote on winner take all, you're going to sit back and you're not going to hit your buttons because you don't think in your heart of hearts that it's an important enough issue for you to have the fight on. You just don't even want to try it. You're going to say the country's at stake and we're all in danger if it doesn't pass. But you're going to say it doesn't quite rise to the level of you actually hitting a button. So when it comes to whether or not we're going to get 23, which I haven't worked this bill, I haven't counted, like the future of our country is at stake. Like, if you're going to tweet out on an issue, if you're going to put out press releases on an issue and try to pressure this legislature to do something, maybe when the concept actually comes up and people are voting on it, maybe y'all should do the work. Maybe y'all should do the work in the committee hearings when the bill is actually introduced, rather than firing off a tweet and a press release with like 5 days of session left. So yeah, we're going to take a vote on winner take all because the issue deserves a vote. It's deserved a vote for years. And I'm not bringing this because there's some angry tweets or on some posts on whatever platform the post happened on. I'm doing it because I genuinely believe in this issue. And when it comes to germaneness, I could have just white copied Senator Bosar's bill. I could have just replaced the entire thing with winner take all, but out of collegiality, I said, nope, we're not going to mess with the work that the government committee did. These things can all coexist. And it's up to this legislative body to vote green to overrule the chair and to ensure that winner take all, if y'all are going to fundraise about it, if you're going to show up to your county conventions and say you support it, to give us a vote on the board so that the people of Nebraska know where you really stand. So I'd encourage you, if you support winner take all in the state of Nebraska, vote green to overrule the chair. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Slama. It's a ruling of the chair that the amendment is not germane to the bill. This motion will require 23 votes to be adopted. The question is the adoption of the motion to overrule the chair. All those in favor vote aye. All opposed vote nay. It's been a request for roll call vote, reverse order. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Wishart. Voting no. Senator Wayne. Voting no. Senator Walls. Voting no. Senator Von Gillern. Voting no. Senator Vargas. Voting no. Senator Slama. Voting yes. Senator Sanders. Voting no. Senator Reapy. Voting yes. Senator Raybold. Senator Merman. Voting yes. Senator Mosier. Voting no. Senator Meyer. Voting no. Senator McKinney. Voting no, Senator McDonald. Voting no, Senator Lowe. Voting no, Senator Lippincott. Not voting, Senator Linehan. Voting no, Senator Kauth. Voting no, Senator Jacobson. Voting no, Senator Ibach. Voting no, Senator Hunt. Voting no, Senator Hughes. Voting no, Senator Holcroft. Voting no, Senator Hardin. Voting no, Senator Hansen. Senator Holleran. Voting no, Senator Frederickson. Voting no, Senator Erdman. Voting yes, Senator Dungan. Voting no, Senator Dover. Voting yes, Senator Dorn. Voting no, Senator DeKay. Voting no, Senator DeBoer. Voting no, Senator Day. Voting no, Senator Conrad. Voting no, Senator Clements. Voting no, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. Voting no, Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting no, Senator Brewer. Voting no, Senator Brandt. Voting no, Senator Bostelman. Voting yes, Senator Bostar. Voting no, Senator Boston. Voting yes, Senator Blood. Voting no, Senator Ballard. Voting yes, Senator Armendariz. Senator Arch. Voting no, Senator Albright. Voting no, Senator Aguilar. Vote is 8 ayes, 36 nays, Mr. President, on the motion to overrule the chair.
Motion to overrule the chair fails. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, committee amendments, Senator McDonald would move to amend the committee amendments with AM 3317.
Senator McDonald, you're welcome to open on the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. 3317 is one line. It changes the average percent to insert a cumulative. Actually takes two words out and adds one word. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Senator Clements, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is regarding county commissioner pay increases, which is limiting them to consumer price index. And if they go, say they go 4 years between a raise in pay, if you use the average, if the average was 3% for 4 years, they'd get a 3% pay. By making it cumulative, if it's 3%, 3, 3, 3, it'd be a 12% pay. And so it is letting them add, if they skip a pay increase, they don't lose that inflation amount. And so I think it is fair to allow for, if they're restricted to the amount of inflation increase, fair to count each year cumulatively, and that's what this amendment would do. So I support AM 3317. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator McDonald, you're recognized to close. Senator McDonald waves. Question for the body is, shall AM 3317 be adopted? All those in favor vote aye. All opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk, record.
37 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on adoption of the amendment.
The amendment is adopted. Mr. Clerk.
I have nothing further at this time, Mr. President.
Senator Brewer, you're welcome to close on the committee amendment. Senator Brewer waives closing. Question before the body is, shall AM 3227 be adopted? All those in favor vote aye. All opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk, record.
41 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on adoption of the committee amendment.
The committee amendments are adopted. Senator Bostar, you're welcome to close on LB 1300.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, colleagues. It was not a direct path to the point we are at now, and it wasn't an easy one. And so I just want to express my appreciation for all of you. And I mean that. And so those of you who took time in the beginning to figure out a plan, Senator Kavanaugh, that effort was invaluable. And then everyone doing what it took to protect the legislation and protect our efforts to help those that are going to be benefited by the legislation. And so just want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. The question before the body is the advancement of LB 1300 to ENR. All those in favor vote aye. All opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk, record.
41 ayes, no nays on advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
The bill is advanced.
Mr. President, next item on the agenda, Legislative Bill 1300A, introduced by Senator Bostar. It's a bill for enacting new appropriations. Appropriates funds to aid in the carrying out of the provisions of Legislative Bill 1300 and declares an emergency. Bill is read for the first time on March 25th of this year and placed directly on general file.
Senator Bostar, you're welcome to open.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you again, colleagues. This is the A bill following LB 1300. The underlying bill doesn't really have a fiscal note, but this is to follow to capture things from the committee amendment. To my knowledge, having gone through it, there isn't really a whole lot to it, but as it's put together, we'll have a better representation of any costs, if applicable, on select file. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Seeing no one else in the queue, you're recognized to close. Senator Bostar waives closing. Question before the body is, shall LB 1300A advance? All in favor vote aye. All opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk, record.
38 ayes, no nays on advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
The bill advances. Items for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Series of motions to be printed from Senator Linehan to LB 233. Amendment to be printed from Senator McDonald to LB 840. Amendments to be printed from Senator Michaela Kavanaugh to LB 1300. Amendment to be printed from Senator Von Gillern to LB 840. Series of amendments, excuse me, Mr. President, to be printed to LB 840, and amendment to be printed from Senator Conrad to LB 1393. Mr. President, as it concerns the agenda, Legislative General File Legislative Bill 1363, introduced by Senator McDonald. It's a bill for an act relating to revenue and taxation. Changes provisions relating to the rate and disbursement of the documentary stamp tax and the Military-Based Development and Support Fund, the Nebraska Film Office Fund, the Innovation Hub Cash Fund, and the Economic Recovery Contingency Fund. Harmonizes provisions, provides an operative date, and repeals original sections. Bill is read for the first time on January 17th of this year and referred to the Revenue Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with committee amendments, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator McDonald, you're welcome to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, colleagues. I'd like to thank the Revenue Committee for their diligent consideration and affirmative vote on the LB 1363, my priority bill. This positive outcome is a significant step forward in our shared mission to enhance and strengthen the well-being of Nebraskans. It could not have been achieved without the committee's thoughtful engagement and commitment to the state's fiscal health and community development. LB 1363 is a legislative proposal designed to refine Nebraska's documentary Stamp Tax Act. It aims to boost businesses and economic growth within the state's military sector by investing in initiatives such as the United States Department of Defense Skill Bridge Program, veteran mental health services, military research and development planning, as well as supporting veteran-owned businesses. Moreover, the bill proposed increased funding for local counties, affordable housing, homeless services, behavioral health, innovation hubs, federally qualified health centers, a state grant office, and the Nebraska Film Office. The documentary stamp, a critical component of our state's fiscal framework, has been multiplied revisions since its establishment, each reflecting a change in economic dynamics and priorities of our state. Initiated in 1968 following the proactive repeal of the Federal Documentary Stamp Act of 1965, the Nebraska Documentary Stamp Tax has been fundamental to our state's financial strategy. The latest revision in 2005 set the rate at $2.25 per thousand of value, demonstrating our shared commitment to meeting community needs and driving growth across the state. LB 1363 now seeks to further refine the documentary stamp, enhancing the effectiveness and sustainability as a support mechanism for our counties. Affordable housing initiatives, homelessness and mental health services, and valued veterans through targeted programs like the Skill Bridge program. I've been working on an amendment developed through close collaboration with key stakeholders, which aims to decrease the overall increase of the documentary stamp. It proposes the removal of rigid earmarks within the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and addresses technical issues in the allocation process of the federal qualified health centers, as identified by the fiscal office. This strategic recalibration is designed to ensure a more equitable and impactful distribution of funds, supporting essential services while fostering economic growth within Nebraska's military sector and other critical areas. At its core, LB 1363 and its amendment represents a holistic approach to resource allocation by tackling systematic issues like the state's underutilization of federal grants. The bill not only refines our fiscal policy, but also opens up a new pathways to prosperity. The legislation effort, with its carefully considered amendments, underscores our deep commitment to improving the well-being of the Nebraskans and guiding our state forward towards a more prosperous and inclusive future. At this critical junction, I call of each of you to reflect on the significant impact of LB 1363 with its enhancements could have on the lives of our constituents. This bill is more than just a piece of legislation. It is a pledge to advance our state's development and a symbol of what we can accomplish when we come together for Nebraska's greater good. Let's proceed in the unified vision and a steadfast resolve to effect enduring changes. And I invite you to carefully consider the support of LB 1363. Now, with the Revenue Committee, when I first started off, and I'll give you a handout of where we currently are with the documentary stamp, with the County Affordable Housing Trust, Site Development, Homeless Shelter Assistance Fund, Behavioral Health. Now, you're going to see at the bottom where we currently are, where my amendment was to the Revenue Committee, and then the Revenue Committee came out with their own amendment, and you'll see that at the bottom with Amendment 3250, where they're looking at the County Affordable Housing Trust Fund, Site and Building Development Fund, Homeless Shelter Trust Fund, Behavioral Health Services. Working with the governor's team on this, coming to an agreement before the session started on moving our doc stamp from $2.25 to $3.25. One of them was the grant office. Looking at actually having a federal grant office. Last year we missed out on potentially, and again, not knowing how much we would have received, in over $2 billion worth of federal grants that we never even applied for. So we started having that kind of discussion, and all the way through, as you see, some of the things I was just talking about, the Military Support Fund, the iHub, the Grant Services, Federal Qualified Health, and the Film Office. I believe Revenue is going to talk, Senator Linehan, a little bit about that and what they were trying to help out with some of the tax incentives for the Film Office. So where we are, where we started, it'll show you on this sheet where we currently are today, my bill is, which I still would like to pursue and have those discussions. But also I appreciate what the Revenue Committee did and handed out in their amendment of Amendment 3250. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. As the clerk stated, there are committee amendments. Senator Linehan, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, colleagues. AM 3250 to LB 1363 changes the amount and distribution of increase to the documentary stamp tax. I'm sorry. AM 3250 limits the increase to 35 cents. As Senator McDonald just stated, the distribution of the increase is 5-cent increase to the amount currently going to the Behavioral Health Services Fund to increase the total amount to 35 cents, 10 cents to the Economic Recovery Contingency Fund for creating and operating an office for grant funding on behalf of the state, 20 cents to the Innovation Hub Cash Fund, operational support of innovation hubs. These targeted assignments will allow for a smaller increase that provides specific assistance to 3 areas that need those funds. I would ask the body to support AM 3250 and LB 1363 as amended and advance it to select file. And as Senator McDonald also noted, he had requested money from the film office, but the Revenue Committee already, and it's now on select, in one of the revenue packages, gave the film industry a tax credit. So we thought we'd start there instead of here. So with that, I appreciate your green vote on both the amendment and the LB 1363.
Thank you, Senator Linehan. Turning to the queue, Senator Jacobson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I rise in opposition to AM 3250 and 1363 because of the dock stamp fee. I think we heard earlier when Senator Clements brought his priority bill, the inheritance tax elimination, that we're going to have to find revenue replacement for counties if we're going to eliminate that revenue source. I made it abundantly clear I hate property taxes and I hate inheritance taxes, but I hate property taxes more. So in order to get the inheritance taxes eliminated and be one of the last states in the country to no longer have to pay an inheritance tax at the state level, we've got to make sure that we can make the counties whole on that loss of revenue source, or we're going to cause a property tax hike, which I would oppose. So to get there, the counties are currently getting 50 cents of the $2.25 dock stamp. So if we move it to $3.25 or $3, that money needs to go to the counties as revenue replacement in order to make the math work on the inheritance tax elimination. So do we want to spend money on films and other spending projects, or do we want to eliminate inheritance tax? That's the choice you're going to have. I'm interested in eliminating the inheritance tax. So I'm going to preserve that income stream to be able to make the inheritance tax bill work. So for those reasons, I'm going to vote no on both the AM and the bill itself. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Erdman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was wondering if Senator McDonald yield to a question or two.
Senator McDonald, will you yield?
Yes. Senator McDonald, I seen on the fiscal note it was 75 cents, but I believe off the mic you told me it was 30. You're raising it 35 cents. Is that correct?
My original bill was $1 to 2.25 to 3.25. That fiscal note is no longer accurate because what Senator Linehan just read from the Revenue Committee, they were raising it at 35 cents.
Okay.
There's handouts coming out right now by the pages, and thank you for doing that. That'll show you the current dock stamp, what was proposed under my original LB 1363, and now it's being proposed under Amendment 3250.
Okay. So do you know how much 35 cents is going to raise?
It's on the sheet that's being handed out.
Okay, I'll wait to see that then. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Senators Erdman and McDonald. Senator Wayne, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Not very often I get up and speak against a McDonald bill. But in this case, I did tell him ahead of time I was not in favor of this bill. This is a sales tax increase when you sell your property. There's another way to say it. A dock stamp is when you sell your property. This is a sales tax increase of about 25% to whatever number we're using, up to 33%, depending on which number. And the other thing is my 1344 deals with iHubs. And the reason that's important is because right now there are only 3 in the state. 2 are in Omaha that have about $30 million behind them from Senator McKinney's bill a couple years ago that is now going to move to the inland port to be dispersed to those iHubs in the Omaha area. So I don't think we're ready yet to have a guaranteed funding source. If you think about LB 1344, which is my bill, I have a tax credit that I'm actually going to pull off a final reading to lower the amount. Right now it's $2 million or $3 million. Nope, it's $6 million per year. I'm pulling that back off a final reading and cutting it down to $500,000. This is just a simple thing of I haven't voted for any sales tax increase. I'm not going to do it today. And so that's where I'm at. This is truly a sales tax increase on your property. I understand what Senator McDonald's doing. I actually like it. I just don't like where all the money's going right now. But I don't like the sales tax increase for that. If it'd be used for something else, then we could probably talk. If affordable housing is our number 1 issue, or number 2, some people say number 3, then increasing the dock stamp to make it more expensive when you sell is kind of going reverse order. And I also have an issue, and this is what I told Senator McDonald, is I don't like taking funds that are used for housing, and I understand right now a little bit's already going to behavioral health, and moving them to something else. I think we have to find different funding sources for those things. I think we have to figure out this housing crisis that we're in and go from there. So that's where I'm at. This is not a filibuster. I'm not going to engage in one until it gets to final reading. That was a joke, but nobody's laughing. So I will end there. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Clements, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, I also stand in opposition to the LB 1363, and I'm glad to see that the Revenue Committee did reduce the request, but I also have other uses for the documentary tax, and especially the counties. I've been working with NACO and the counties on inheritance tax. Actually, they were filibustering the inheritance tax bill, but I've worked out an arrangement with them, but they would like some documentary tax increase to fund the revenue they would lose on inheritance tax. And so I would like to keep the inheritance tax where it is for the time being. And the counties had some good points, I thought. The counties collect documentary tax. It's when you sell property, the seller is required to pay this tax because it records the deed. And the county records the deed. They have to keep the deeds on file for, I think, forever. And so it's a filing fee, and it helps fund the register of deeds in each county. And they're getting only 50 cents out of $2.25 to keep those deed records on file indefinitely. This would be a 15.5% increase of the cost of the documentary tax fee on a house sale. I see the committee amendment has another 5 cents added for the behavioral health. The behavioral health has been getting $5.2 million a year. This would increase it to $6.1 million a year. We have funding for behavioral health in the budget directly also. So this is in addition, and we had a lot of discussion about behavioral health. We actually reduce their base because they hadn't been using all the money they had. And I'm not proposing reducing their rate, but I don't think an increase is needed at this point in time. And like Senator Wayne said, the iHub, there's only 3 iHubs, and the amount in the committee bill is 20 cents, which is $3,500,000 a year to go to 3 iHubs. And this is Senator Wayne is a promoter of the iHubs, but he said they don't need any of that. So that 20 cents of this increase, he's thinking may not even be used. So why do we tax somebody when the real promoter of an entity doesn't think they need it? So those are my reasons that I'm going to be voting no on this bill. And I would appreciate it if you would also think of, in the future, allowing the counties, when we get around to inheritance tax again, to use that for some of the replacement revenue that would give every county some revenue statewide, and especially because the county is the one that's collecting this tax and recording those deeds and keeping those records permanently. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Senator Dover, you're recognized.
Yeah, I rise in opposition to the amendment 3250 and also the 1363. My main concern is that I would, having been on appropriations with Senator McDonald, I'll say that there probably isn't anyone that's probably more creative, more diligent in finding sources of funds, except for maybe Senator Wayne's is a close second. But I would say that we need to be very, very careful when we start increasing taxes. I would say I really believe that the dock stamp is really a source for housing. I mean, the majority's lion's share of the dock stamp has always gone toward affordable housing. And I would suggest we keep doing that. I do have a bill that was still in committee that will be coming out next year, but if affordable housing really is one of our major concerns, I would suggest that what my bill did was basically took 25 cents, and the best use of funds is to put down payment assistance. So basically what the bill would do, that'll be coming up next session, is 25 cents dock stamp increase on a house sale of $1 million, excuse me, $1 million home sales would be somewhere around $250, which I think is not too burdensome. And that would go toward down payment assistance and a revolving fund. And over a number of years, there would be $50 million revolving in and out for down payment assistance. I really think we need to prioritize what's most important in our state. And I don't think there'd be anyone that in this area that would probably disagree that affordable housing is one of them. I also don't believe that getting rid of inheritance tax should be funded with that dock stamp. I can understand somewhat of the connection there, but I do believe that dock stamps should be kept low. I think it is increase the cost of sales. I think if we do choose to increase 25 cents or whatever, that should go toward affordable housing, because that's a larger challenge that we have here in the state of Nebraska. So I would speak against AM 3250 and LB 1363, and also in the future also using dock stamps to get rid of inheritance tax. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time to the chair.
Thank you, Senator Dover. Senator McDonald, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to discuss a few things. So right now, as long as we're not getting too confused with the amendment 3250, we are talking about the increase of 35 cents based on the iHub, the grant services, and the film office, as Senator Linehan mentioned, was taken out. But we still are looking at the homeless shelter assistance, behavioral health. And if you look at what I handed out last time while I was speaking, your left-hand column is your current, and then it has to do with the amendment, the original amendment 2783 to the 1363. Working with the Revenue Committee, working with the governor's office, we started off at the dollar. the idea of where we can do with the dock stamp, what's going forward in the future based on potentially using it in some other way. We think this was a good investment of the taxpayer dollars. And again, Senator Wayne did talk to me, and he's not wrong. It's an increase based on the idea that we currently are at 225 and we are adding the 35 cents. Originally, we were talking about going to 325. So we have made those adjustments, having those discussions. The documentary stamp, the history of it has worked, has made a positive impact. We think this is a reasonable request through the governor and his team moving forward. It is my priority bill. I am asking to move this forward onto from general to select. I appreciate working with the Revenue Committee, and I think 35 cents is a reasonable request. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Senator Clements, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. The one thing I didn't mention my first time up was what's labeled as grant services. And I've been told that the governor wants to have somebody that does work on federal grants to get more federal dollars on various projects, but adding this to the cost of a house for selling a house doesn't make that much sense to me. It would be $1.7 million per year. I'd rather have the governor come and ask for maybe Department of Economic Development or HHS, somebody, to ask for that in their budget next year. And rather than take $1.7 million from house sales, that I don't see where it's related to a sale of a house. I heard Senator McDonald talk about homeless shelters. On the handout he has, there is no change. The committee amendment does not change homeless shelters. I do support keeping funding of homeless shelters, which is 25 cents, $4.3 million a year. And homelessness is related to housing and house sales. Funding homeless shelters is a related item in housing. So that does make sense to me. So I'm not in support. I'm going to be a red vote on AM 3250. I don't have any amendment of my own. I just would like to see this stay the way it is. So I ask for your red vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Senator Erdman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think I have this figured out. I was just visiting with Senator McDonald off the mic, and 35-cent increase in the dock stamp should raise about 6.2 million. And because 25 cents is 4.4 according to his chart. And so I'm calculating to be 6.2 million. So I was wondering if Senator McDonald yielded a question. Senator McDonald, this idea of raising the dock stamp and going to the inland ports and where you're going to send this money, was that something that was brought to you, or was that your idea?
No, that was worked on with the governor's team. There was a number of different people involved, as you see the differences with the idea of the county, film offices, federal qualified health centers, grant services, iHub. So that was all part of the discussions and brought to either our office or the governor's.
The next question may be a loaded question, but you heard Senator Wayne comment about the iHubs. Maybe don't need this funding right now. Would you agree with that or not?
No, I would not agree with that based on the working on this through the fall. Again, with the governor's team trying to come up with a total of we ended up coming up at that point, a total of $1, it's now 35 cents, was that we felt there was the need there.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's all I have. So let me finish up with this. You heard Senator Clements talk about wanting to do something to try to help the counties replace the inheritance tax, and he was considering raising the dock stamp as well. And I'm not in favor of raising taxes of any kind, but I will say this. I'm really, really, really glad I've sold all my properties in Nebraska and we're closing on the 12th, so I don't have to pay this extra dock stamp because it cost me another couple $100. So I'm glad I'm going to be out of Nebraska and stop paying these taxes. But I'm not in favor of raising the taxes. I don't care where you send it. I'm not in favor of raising the dock stamp. And so that's where I'm going to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Clements, you recognize. This is your third time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Wayne yield to a question?
Senator Wayne, will you yield?
Yes, ebony and ivory.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Regarding the iHub fund, you mentioned you don't think it's necessary. Would the money for iHub, would that be related to housing?
No, it's not related to housing. And the reason why I say they don't need it right now is the applications are actually closed. So there's only 3. And then inside the Omaha area, we have $30 million going to an innovation district through the inland port, which is going to the iHubs, or potentially going to the iHubs. So you don't need any more right now. We should wait and see how they are functioning. So that's why I don't think they need them.
Right, that would be like $3.4 million a year. And do you think their funding is adequate now?
Yes, they have private dollars, donations. There are nonprofits, and they are being funded right now.
Thank you, Senator Wayne.
Thank you.
So we have one increase here that is not necessary. And I'd rather just leave the documentary tax where it is. And I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clements. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Linehan, you recognize to close on the committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know there are concerns, but there's some confusion. The Revenue Committee looked at this. We studied it. It's late at night. I know everybody might be not happy quite with this, but I feel like we owe it to Senator McDonald, and I would ask you, unless you've got up and said otherwise, to please vote green on the committee amendment and the underlying bill. If there's a real issue we have to address before select, we can do that. But I think at 9:30 at night, Senator McDonald's priority bill deserves to go to select. Thank you very much.
Question before the body is the adoption of the amendment 3250. All those in favor vote aye. All opposed vote nay. It's been a request for a call of the House. The question is, shall the House go under call? All those in favor vote aye. All opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
23 ayes, 4 nays, place House under call, Mr. President.
The House is under call. Senators, please record your presence. Those unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. Senator DeBoer, Senator Bostar, Senator Hughes, Senator Dungan, Senator Bozen, Senator John Kavanaugh. Please check in. The House is under call. Senator DeBoer, Senator Hughes, Senator John Kavanaugh, please check in. The House is under call. Senator Hughes, would you please check in? The House is under call. Senator Hughes, please check in. The House is under call. Senator Linehan, a vote is open. Would you accept call-in votes? Senator Linehan, a vote is open. Will you accept call-ins?
Yes.
We're now accepting call-ins.
Senator Wayne. Remaining a no. Senator Dungan. Voting yes. Senator Lowe. Voting no. Senator Bostar. Voting yes. Senator Dorn voting no. Senator Lippincott voting no.
Been a request for a roll call vote, Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar. Senator Albright. Voting yes. Senator Arch. Voting yes. Senator Armendariz. Senator Ballard. Voting no. Senator Blood. Senator Boston. Voting no. Senator Bostar. Voting yes. Senator Bostelman. Voting no. Senator Brandt. Voting yes. Senator Brewer. Voting yes. Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting no. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Senator Clements. Voting no, Senator Conrad. Voting no, Senator Day. Senator DeBoer. Not voting, Senator Decay. Voting yes, Senator Dorn. Voting no, Senator Dover. Voting no, Senator Dungan. Voting yes, Senator Erdman. Voting no, Senator Frederickson. Not voting, Senator Holleran. Voting no, Senator Hansen. Senator Hardin. Voting no, Senator Holcroft. Voting no, Senator Hughes. Voting no, Senator Hunt. Voting yes, Senator Ibach. Voting no, Senator Jacobson. Voting no, Senator Kauth. Voting yes, Senator Linehan. Voting yes, Senator Lippincott. Voting no, Senator Lowe. Voting no, Senator McDonald. Voting yes, Senator McKinney. Voting no, Senator Meyer. Voting yes, Senator Mosier. Senator Merman. Voting yes, Senator Raybold. Senator Reapy. Voting no, Senator Sanders. Voting yes, Senator Slama. Senator Vargas. Voting no, Senator Von Gillard. Voting yes, Senator Walls. Voting no, Senator Wayne. Voting no. Vote is 15 ayes, 22 nays, Mr. President, on the adoption of the committee amendment.
The committee amendment is not adopted. I raise the call. Returning to the queue, debate on the bill. Senator Jacobson, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I appreciate the vote on the amendment. I just remind everyone again, we can kick it to select, but there's nothing on the table to change. I heard nothing that's going to make this bill better. So kicking the select will really get us nowhere. It will just have another bill out there that's got a fiscal note that we can't afford. So I would encourage another red vote on the bill itself, and let's keep moving. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Wayne, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm going to take a little time. So I've been in a situation before where you have an amendment from the committee and you're not always sure where you are, and it's kind of late. And I think McDonald's good at talking and figuring out how to get to a yes. I know I have issues with the bills, and that's what I said in the beginning. I think it's a problem, but I think it's something that maybe you can resolve. And I would hope we can give McDonald the night to help figure that out. I think if you were to see what McDonald has done over the years down here and help people get from general to select to work on that, I think we owe that to him. And so I know right now, again, it's late at night, it's 9:30. You're not going to get some quality negotiations done with people on both sides. So what I would ask is that we could, I don't have a motion pad, or I would have filed the motion, but if I'm talking to see if somebody is hopefully doing something, but I would like to make sure we adjourn so it gives us a time to talk. I'm not fully abandoning the idea, but I do think at 9:30 at night, sometimes it's hard to make a hard run and figure out where people are on all the issues and what all the issues were. I know I talked to Senator McDonald ahead of time, but I can guess some people are against this bill who probably have not talked to him and have not figured out if there's a path. And to Senator Jacobson's point, there may not be a path, and that's okay too. But I think one thing that makes this place unique with us just being a unicameral is, and 49 of us, is we can have that dialogue and we can figure it out within a shorter period of time. But I know 9:40 isn't the time to try to figure that out and come up with a decent bill. Now, in general file, for those who don't know, because I'm taking time, not to lecture, but to see what the commotion up there and let them figure it out. On general file, if a bill doesn't advance, it's not dead. It's just been a long practice for the last 30 years to allow it to be dead, but it actually is, it has to be died 3 times before it's dead. So it's just never, because of time, you never get a chance to bring it back up. But I don't necessarily know if it's a way to go or not. So I'm going to let those individuals on their bill talk about it. And this is the same courtesy that I would hope anybody would extend to anybody in this body at 9:40 at night on a personal priority, because I'm pretty sure from at least the people I talked to, a lot of people didn't know what this bill did and kind of were against it when you started reading it. And I think we could at least have a conversation about within the 24 hours of how to fix it. That's all I'm saying. Again, I don't know if it'll change my position on it. I just told Senator McDonald yesterday, and today I was doing actual work, and then you saw me running around on the floor, so I never had a full chance to sit down and talk to him. So that's why I pushed my button, because I saw the board, and I just wanted to give somebody an opportunity to make sure that we extend the same courtesies that we do to almost everybody in here. I don't think I ever seen a lot of that. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Hunt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, colleagues. Good evening, Nebraskans. I just have a brief comment to put a coda on my day. Today was an eventful, newsworthy day in the legislature. I was driving in today and I said, I hope something exciting happens today because, sometimes these things make life worth living. And today was an exciting day. Senator McDonald changed his official party registration. That made a lot of national news. We took up an amendment to make Nebraska a winner-take-all state. That made national news. Nebraska was trending on Twitter. National news channels are talking about our state, and a lot of people were tuning in and watching. And what I want to tell people who have been driving me crazy in the media, not our local journalists who are doing amazingly and perfectly, and anybody trying to report on what's happening in Nebraska, don't look at anything in any other state to represent what's happening here, because it's different here. Look at our local journalists and our local reporters to figure out what's happening on the ground here, because they're the ones sitting under that balcony every day in the room where these things are happening. And so all you have to do is look at that last vote that we took on the amendment on Senator McDonald's bill to see why Nebraska is so different. That board was lit up like a Christmas tree, red and green, across parties, across urban, rural, across age, across demographic. And that's what we're actually about here in Nebraska. And what happened today here makes me very proud. I'm proud of our colleague, Senator McDonald, for sticking to his own convictions and finding a home in a party that he feels he can belong to. I did the same thing last year when I registered as a nonpartisan. I understand what that means. And to see the discourse in the national media, it seems like a lot of people jump to conclusions about that, but that does not actually represent what we stand for in Nebraska. So I'm proud of us today, proud of that last vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Mr. Clerk, for priority motion.
Mr. President, Senator Wayne would move to reconsider the vote taken on the committee amendment, AM 3250.
Senator Wayne, you're welcome to open on the committee.
Thank you. And I'll just be real brief so we can get out of here. And it's more like just a lesson. So not present, not voting, you can reconsider. Or if you're on the prevailing side, you can reconsider. So I was on the prevailing side, so we're reconsidering. So with that, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Thank you, Mr. President. Series of items at this time. Amendments to be printed from Senator Wayne to LB 25. Additionally, priority motion, Senator Hardin would move to adjourn the body until Thursday, April 4th, 2024 at 9:00 a.m.
Members, you've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. All opposed, nay. We are adjourned.